Chapter 171. As the saying goes, some people are happy while others are sad. Although Zhang Xiaohua wasn't very happy on the first day of the martial arts exhibition, at least she wasn't sad. As for the two brothers from the Lotus Flower Escort Agency, it was hard to say. Shang Guanyan's face was extremely unsightly as he stood below a ring, looking at the group of youngsters, or rather children, who were a head shorter than him, who were chattering about their experiences on the first day of the competition. He felt an unusual bitterness in his heart. He finally understood the reason why no one from the Lotus Escort Agency had participated in this martial arts exhibition for decades. However, for this simple reason, the price he had to pay was really too great. Fortunately, the sky was already dark at this time, and no one paid attention to this young man who had lost 3 matches in a row. Otherwise, Shang Guanyin would rather make a crack in the ground and hide in it. Thinking about it, why did he listen to Yu Dei's instigation? Was it because of his curiosity that he got involved in this mess? Or was it because of his longing for the ethereal sect? Curiosity killed the cat. Since ancient times, countless examples had shown that impulsiveness and curiosity had a heavy price to pay. His cat hadn't been killed, but his self-esteem had been completely strangled. Thinking about the 3 matches he had just gone through, he had thought that his martial arts had already had some foundation. In addition, he had trained hard in the Lotus Flower Escort Agency's Martial Arts Training Center for nearly a year. Although it wasn't enough to deal with these children, he should at least have the strength to fight back. But the seemingly naive and childish children below were completely different people in the ring. They were merciless in the competition. Their fists were skillful, their figures were graceful, and even their internal strength had reached a certain level. On the other hand, other than the last child who was slightly weaker, he had fought for half an hour before he was forced to the corner of the ring and had no choice but to raise his hand and admit defeat. The other 2 had all knocked him out of the ring within a few dozen moves. Thinking of this, Shang Guanyin shook his head slightly and said to himself, "This trip to the Misty School, it was a mistake. This is so embarrassing. But I wonder how Yu Dei's results are?" At this time, a small shadow flitted across his heart, but was immediately driven away by him. If he had been defeated so badly, what else could be said about the youth? He must have been beaten black and blue. On the other side, Yu Dei wasn't having an easy time either. He was number 2 and had to go up in the first round. Yu Dei had initially looked down on him. After all, he had his family's internal force cultivation method and had been practicing it for a long time. He also knew the power of this internal force. Wasn't it his fault that the Lotus Flower Escort Agency had crippled Zhang Xiaohua's hand? Therefore, when he entered the arena, he did not dare to use 10% of his inner strength. He only used 50%. But the Misty School youth opposite him didn't buy it and used 10% of his inner strength to compete with him. Although that youth was younger than Yu Dei and hadn't been practicing his internal force cultivation method for as long as him, he was talented and his internal force cultivation method was advanced. The depth of his inner strength was actually not much worse than Yu Dei's. Therefore, when Yu Dei saw that the situation wasn't good, he immediately focused 120% of his attention and used 10% of his inner strength to treat the youth in front of him as an equal opponent. Only then did they manage to be evenly matched. That youth saw that he didn't have the upper hand and immediately changed the rules of the competition. He used his qigong and an exquisite palm technique to fight with him. Yu Dei's moves weren't as exquisite as his opponent's, and his qigong wasn't as agile as his opponent's. He could only rely on his own deep inner strength and adopt a defensive stance. Only then was he able to steadily defend against his opponent's attacks for the time it took for a stick of incense to burn. When the team leader announced that it was a draw, Yu Dei secretly let out a sigh of relief. If he had another half an incense stick of time, he would have definitely lost. Unfortunately, Yu Dei was happy too early, because he had used up too much of his inner strength in the first round. He hadn't fully recovered by the time he entered the arena again. And his opponent for the second round was even crazier. It was a youth who had deeper inner strength than Yu Dei's previous opponent and whose moves were more exquisite. From the start, he didn't give Yu Dei a chance to catch his breath. He immediately took the initiative and attacked nonstop. Yu Dei's inner strength wasn't enough, and his moves and body techniques couldn't compare to his opponent's. As he retreated to defend, he cried in his heart, "Brother, can you not bully me like this? Can you at least leave me some face?" However, his opponent didn't have any special abilities and didn't know what Yu Dei was thinking. He only focused on attacking. Before a quarter of the incense stick had even burned, Yu Dei was kicked out of the arena by his opponent. After falling out of the arena, Yu Dei wasn't discouraged. He secretly hid the sadness of his defeat and hurriedly circulated his inner strength to recover his inner strength. He wanted to obtain all 3 points in the third round. Man proposes, God disposes. Yu Dei's fate was actually already sealed when he drew the number plate with Zhang Xiaohua and Shang Guanyin. Yu Dei's third round was simply a replica of the first round. He was constantly suppressed by his opponent and could only breathe a sigh of relief after the time it took to burn a stick of incense. With 2 draws and 1 loss, Yu Dei stood below the arena. As one of his fellow sufferers, he couldn't help but have the same thoughts as Shang Guanyin. His self-esteem had suffered a huge blow. At the same time, he also thought that if he was like this, then what would happen to Shang Guanyin and Zhang Xiaohua, who was half-baked and had a crippled right hand? However, Yu Dei still had a different feeling in his heart. This Misty School was indeed a famous school. Even though he was just a commoner, he had such strength. He wasn't a match for him, even though he had practiced for many years. If he could enter such a school to further his studies, then in a few years his martial arts would improve by leaps and bounds. However, he was already old and his aptitude might not be much better than these youngsters who were much shorter than him. The Misty School might not make an exception and accept him. Thinking of this, Yu Dei immediately thought of Zhang Xiaohu's figure in his heart. How could this country bumpkin catch the eye of the Misty School and become a disciple of the Misty School? Thinking of Zhang Xiaohu's country bumpkin appearance and then looking at his own clothes, Yu Dei couldn't help but raise his head and look at the dark sky. From the bottom of his heart, he shouted, "Heavens, I'm so handsome. Why don't you care more about me? Is it because I'm too handsome that you treat me this way? The heavens are really unfair. Why don't you send down lightning and strike those?" Just as he thought of this, he heard thunder in the sky. Yu Dei's heart skipped a beat. Did the heavens hear his prayers? He then stole a glance at the youngster beside him. No one else seemed to be paying attention to him. Only then did he feel relieved. Suddenly, Yu Dei had a malicious thought. If everyone else ate until they had diarrhea, then tomorrow wouldn't he? Yu Dei secretly prayed again. Zhang Xiaohua, on the other hand, didn't have the same thoughts and worries as the other two. After a day of competition, he was a little hungry. Although the people from the Misty School didn't live a life of luxury, they were still favored by the heavens. After coming to the Misty School, their basic necessities were all arranged by someone, and they didn't need to worry about it. Now that they heard Zhang Xiaohua ask such a stupid question, they couldn't help but lower the position of Zhang Xiaohua in their hearts by a few notches. Thus, Zhang Xiaohua's already bad image became even worse. The other youngsters all distanced themselves from him as if he wasn't in the same group as them. Team Leader Chang didn't know his background. Looking at the strange gazes around him, he still braced himself and said, "Well, in a while you can eat with us. I'm not too sure about your arrangements. If Steward Su comes to look for you later, you can make other plans." When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, his eyes lit up. He moved closer to Team Leader Chang and asked, "Then what are our standards? Is there red braised pork?" "I ate first-class meals at Huan, Shi Mountain Manor. Our Misty School shouldn't be worse than them, right?" When Team Leader Chang heard this, he quickly distanced himself from him as if he wasn't familiar with him. He coughed twice and said, "Well, I don't know what's the difference between this and your Huan Shi Mountain Manor's first-class meals. As for this red braised pork, I'm not sure if it was prepared today. We usually don't eat much of it." Zhang Xiaohua was a little disappointed and said, "You actually don't eat much red braised pork." Seems like the standards aren't high. Team leader Chang didn't know whether to laugh or cry and said, "That stuff is too greasy, and it's easy to gain weight. It will affect the figure, so we don't eat much." Zhang Xiaohua suddenly understood and nodded. "So it's like that. But the red braised pork is very fragrant and is more delicious than the others." However, team leader Chang didn't seem to be in the mood to talk to him about this. He called team leader Li and the other disciples to pack up and leave. Suddenly, Zhang Xiaohua seemed to have thought of something and quickly walked in front of team leader Chang and asked, "Team leader Chang, can I ask you one more thing?" Team leader Chang took a step back and asked hesitantly, "Say it and see if I can answer." Zhang Xiaohua said mysteriously, "For people like us who came from outside to participate in the martial arts exhibition, can we walk around freely in the Misty School? Or if I want to go to other places to find familiar people, is that okay?" Captain Chang looked at Zhang Xiaohua's mysterious appearance and asked such a question. He almost vomited blood. He could only grit his teeth and say, "Well, I really don't know. Why don't you wait a moment? I'll send someone over to ask." After saying that, he waved his hand to a child who had competed with Zhang Xiaohua and said, "Moo Moo, quickly go find Steward Su and tell him about the problem of number 250. See how to deal with it." The child agreed and skipped away. Not long after, he came back and said, "Steward Su said that we can walk around freely in the Misty School. However, we can't go to some forbidden areas. There are also some places guarded by guards that are not allowed to enter. Also, we can't force our way in. In addition, the 3 people who came from outside to participate in the competition have already arranged accommodation. It's best to stay in the sect at night and rest early so that you can participate in tomorrow's competition on time." Team leader Chang nodded and turned to ask, 250, do you understand?" Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "I understand, Team leader Chang. Then I'll go find someone." Team leader Chang was bursting with joy and said, "What? You're not going to eat first? Let's eat first." Zhang Xiaohua shook her head and said, "Let's find someone first." "Oh, right. Where does sect leader O's direct disciple live?" Team leader Chang was startled and secretly thought, "See, I told you that there was something fishy going on. It was just as I expected. Fortunately, I didn't offend him just now." Thus, team leader Chang used an abnormally amiable voice and explained the route in detail. Zhang Xiaohua waited until she understood everything before bowing and taking her leave. Watching Zhang Xiaohua's departing figure, team leader Chang also let out a long sigh. The trouble had finally left on its own. At this time, the sky was already completely dark. However, the Misty School was still brightly lit. Many people were walking around in 2s and 3s. They were all excitedly talking about interesting news and experiences from the competition. Although team leader Chang gave a very detailed description of Zhang Xiaohua's residence, he couldn't stand up to Zhang Xiaohua's poor sense of direction. In less than a moment, she lost her way and didn't know where to go. However, the Misty School didn't lack warm-hearted people, especially when they heard that Zhang Xiaohua was going to the direct disciples' residence. Many people volunteered to personally send Zhang Xiaohua there. Zhang Xiaohua was covered in goosebumps from their attentiveness. She thought of the situation her second brother was in last time and hurriedly rejected countless people's good intentions. She expressed that she didn't dare to disturb their fun during dinner and that she would go alone as long as she told them the directions. Thus, under the resentful gazes of countless people and the helpless feeling of being rejected, Zhang Xiaohua took one step at a time and finally arrived near Zhang Xiaohu's residence. However, at this time, a group of female disciples walked towards her. Wasn't the one at the front of the group Ming Tsue Hall's Aunt Qin and Hall Master Qin? Zhang Xiaohua's eyes were sharp and she had already seen them. She couldn't help but feel happy. She raised her hand and called out, "Big Sister Qin, Big Sister Qin." Aunt Qin led a group of young female disciples and was surrounded by the fiery gazes of male disciples. Naturally, she didn't notice Zhang Xiaohua among the countless people. At this time, when she heard someone call her, she was secretly puzzled. "Who has the guts to call me that?" When she saw the small and thin figure in the crowd, she was pleasantly surprised. Zhang Xiaohua, why are you here? Zhang Xiaohua walked forward and bowed. I'm here to participate in the martial arts competition. Aunt Qin was surprised and asked, You're not a disciple of our Misty School. How can you participate in the martial arts competition? Could it be that you can also advance? Zhang Xiaohua explained the situation in detail. Only then did Aunt Qin understand. She said, I really don't know about this. However, the martial arts competition has already been held for a day. How are your results? Even if you're only at the first rank of commoner clothing, the martial arts of those youths are still extremely powerful. When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she shrugged and shook her head slightly. When Aunt Qin saw this, she naturally knew that her results weren't good. She hurriedly comforted her. Zhang Xiaohua, it's okay. If you lose, you lose. Just treat it as coming to see the world. All right, what are you doing now? Where are you going? When she heard that Zhang Xiaohua wanted to find Zhang Xiaohu, she smiled and said to a female disciple behind her, Chang'e, you know Zhang Xiaohua? Bring Zhang Xiaohua over. Don't let him find the wrong place again. That female disciple walked out of the crowd and looked at Zhang Xiaohua with a strange gaze. When Zhang Xiaohua heard that someone else knew her, she was surprised. When Chang'e walked out of the crowd of female disciples, she frowned slightly. Then she relaxed and said with a smile, Yes, I know elder sister Chang'e. Aren't we just going together? Aunt Qin didn't wait for Zhang Xiaohua to finish and immediately interrupted her. It's good that you know Chang'e. Let her take you so you don't get lost again. Zhang Xiaohua laughed and said with a double meaning, I know, elder sister Qin. Afterwards, she bid farewell to Aunt Qin and was led by Chang'e to Zhang Xiaohu's residence. Along the way, Chang'e was very curious about how Zhang Xiaohua had killed the black-clothed old man. After all, she had personally experienced that person's power and saw Zhang Xiaohua kill him with her own eyes. Ever since they returned from the south, the news of Yen down south had been strictly sealed. Even the news of Zhang Xiaohua coming back alive was only later found out by Chang'e. She had always been very curious about what kind of unique skills Zhang Xiaohua had, that she wasn't afraid of the black-clothed old man's iron shirt and light golden palm. Today was such a coincidence that she was caught red-handed. How could she let Zhang Xiaohua go? Like a curious child, she asked this and that. Zhang Xiaohua had gone down south with her. Although they hadn't talked, they could be considered to have gone through trials and tribulations together. There was no need to keep Zhang Xiaohua's matters a secret from her. Thus, Zhang Xiaohua told her in full detail about what she had said and done with Elder Yu that day. Chang'e still didn't believe her. She opened her big round eyes and asked, Is it really that simple? It was that person's negligence. Zhang Xiaohua had an expression that said, I knew you wouldn't believe me. She said, It was originally like this. If I was powerful, I wouldn't have been able to tie 3 matches in a row today. Tie 3 matches in a row. When Chang'e heard this, she laughed out loud and said, You're really good. When I was a commoner, I didn't hear of many people tying 3 matches in a row. As she spoke, Chang'e suddenly said, I was just talking to you. Aren't we already here? This is where the direct disciples live. Do you know where your second brother lives? If you don't know, we'll have to find someone to ask. Zhang Xiaohua thought for a moment and said, There's a small tree in front of my second brother's courtyard. Look, that should be it. I came here once during the day, so I still have a bit of an impression of it. After saying this, Zhang Xiaohua led Chang'e to Zhang Xiaohu's courtyard. She smiled and pointed at the small tree, saying, It's this small tree. There's no mistake. I can't recognize the road, but I still have an impression of the tree. After saying this, Zhang Xiaohua walked up and knocked on the door. It was still quiet inside. Chang'e said in a small voice, Could it be that your second brother isn't here? Today is the day of my Misty School's martial arts practice. He must have gone somewhere to watch the fun. Or perhaps the sect leader had something to do and let him go. Zhang Xiaohua smiled mysteriously and said, You don't know about this, right? Elder Sister Changa, watch me. After saying this, she stopped knocking on the door. Instead, she pointed her mouth at the crack of the door and sang loudly, Zhang Xiaohu, oh Zhang Xiaohu. Your younger brother is Zhang Xiaohua. He asked me to ask you, are you still in the courtyard? Are you in the courtyard? As soon as she finished singing, the door opened with a creak. A joyful voice came from inside. Xiaohua, is that you? Why did you come at this time? Wasn't it Zhang Xiaohu who walked out of the door? Zhang Xiaohu saw that the person in front of him was his younger brother. He was very surprised. He walked over and rubbed his head, saying, Why did you come here now? Zhang Xiaohua said with grievance, Don't keep rubbing my head. It'll affect my growth. By the way, I didn't come here alone. Really? Zhang Xiaohu was surprised. He raised his head and looked outside, asking, Who else is there? Is it Li Jinfeng, young Master Li? -1. Chapter 172. Looking up, Changa was standing not far away, looking at the two brothers with a beautiful smile. The female disciples of the Misty School were outstanding. Every one of them was incomparably beautiful and had an extraordinary temperament. Changa was dressed in a tight suit, looking particularly valiant in the dark night. At this time, a crack suddenly appeared in the dark clouds in the sky. The bright moonlight shone down on Changa's body. Under the moonlight, Changa saw Zhang Xiaohu looking at her. She pursed her lips and walked up to him. Zhang Xiaohu suddenly felt an electric shock in his heart. He felt a burst of heartache, followed by a burst of heat. His eyes stared at Changa, and he could no longer speak. Zhang Xiaohua did not notice her second brother's appearance. She hurriedly greeted Changa and said, Sister Changa, this is my second brother, Zhang Xiaohu. Haha, he is now Hero Wen's disciple. Her words were full of infinite pride. Changa smiled and walked up to Zhang Xiaohu. She saluted and said, Hello, Zhang Xiaohu. I don't know if I should call you junior brother or senior brother. In fact, according to the rules of the Misty School, the first to enter the door is the elder. Zhang Xiaohu really did have to call Changa senior sister. However, the disciples of Openg's line also had some special characteristics. Sometimes the seniority was also determined by age. However, in Zhang Xiaohu's case, entering the Misty School at such an old age was rare, so Changa asked this question. Zhang Xiaohu looked at Changa's face, which was as beautiful as a flower. He opened his mouth, but didn't know what to say. Based on his usual personality, he would probably call her senior apprentice sister, out of humility. But in front of this girl, he couldn't bring himself to call her senior apprentice sister. Seeing this, Zhang Xiaohua was very puzzled. She said to Changa, My second brother is older than me by 5 years. He should be 19 this year. Sister Changa, how old are you? Hearing this, Changa smiled and said, In that case, your second brother should be older. After that, he cupped his hands and saluted Zhang Xiaohu. I am Changa of Mingsui Hall. Greetings, senior martial brother. Seeing that Changa was so generous, Zhang Xiaohu was even more delighted. He also saluted and said, I'm Zhang Xiaohu. Greetings, junior sister Changa. After the two saluted, Changa asked, Senior martial brother, are you the disciple who recently joined the sect? These words were very vague, but Zhang Xiaohu understood and nodded with a bitter smile. Changa smiled and said, I was wondering why there was a rumor recently that a disciple relied on nepotism to join the Misty School's direct disciples. I was very puzzled. Our boss, isn't a person who only listens to one side. How could he make such a mistake? Now that I've seen Zhang Xiaohua, I know the reason. Zhang Xiaohu didn't quite understand. Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly explained. Elder sister Changa and I went out with our manor lord O. That's how we met. Zhang Xiaohu also suddenly understood. He hurriedly opened the door and said, This isn't the place to talk. Junior sister Changa, please come in. Changa waved her hand and said, No need, senior martial brother. The hall master told me to bring Zhang Xiaohua here. I still have to hurry back. There's a competition tomorrow, so I have to go back early to prepare. Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohu hurriedly said, I heard that the competition at the martial arts exhibition is very important. Junior's sister should go back early. I won't invite you in for a chat." Chang'e saluted the two again and turned to leave. Zhang Xiaohu suddenly asked, "That junior sister Chang'e, where will your competition be tomorrow?" Hearing this, Chang'e covered her mouth and laughed. "Our Mingcue Hall's competition will naturally be in the hall. You male disciples aren't allowed to watch." Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but feel embarrassed. He scratched his head. Chang'e looked at Zhang Xiaohua and said, "Isn't Zhang Xiaohua also competing tomorrow? You can go and cheer him on. I'll see if tomorrow's competition ends early. If it ends early, I'll also go to the Young Eagle Hall to cheer Zhang Xiaohua on." Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohu was overjoyed. He watched Chang'e leave. After Chang'e left, the two brothers entered the courtyard. Without waiting for Zhang Xiaohua to sit down, Zhang Xiaohu impatiently asked, "Xiaohua, why are you also participating in the martial arts exhibition?" Zhang Xiaohua had no choice but to be patient and tell him the whole story again. Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohu couldn't help but feel uneasy. He said, "Xiaohua, how can you do as you please? No matter what, you have to discuss this with me." Zhang Xiaohua stared blankly and asked in puzzlement, "What's there to discuss? Isn't it just a martial arts competition?" Zhang Xiaohu stamped his feet and said, "Xiaohua, you didn't stay in the Misty School. You don't know how powerful the Misty School is. When I was in the Lotus Flower Escort Agency, I felt that my aptitude wasn't good enough. As long as we have the will to endure hardships, we won't be worse than others." Zhang Xiaohua said, "That's right, second brother. I also feel the same way." Zhang Xiaohu bitterly smiled and said, "I've gained a lot of knowledge during my time in the Misty School. Let's not talk about the level of brocade clothing and the high level of cloth clothing. Let's just talk about the level of cloth clothing that you're participating in. I've actually seen a few young disciples compete. I won't hide it from you. My self-esteem has taken a big hit. I feel that the martial arts that I've learned is simply not a match for others. Think about it, a child whose height just reaches my chest has better martial arts than me, and whose internal strength is higher than mine. If I were to be beaten down in the arena, where would I put my face?" Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua slightly frowned and interrupted her second brother, saying, "Second brother, I think what you said is wrong. What does this martial arts competition have to do with face? If you don't compete for the sake of face, then your martial arts will never improve. As the ancients say, the one who reaches the top is the teacher. It doesn't matter if the other person is young or old. As long as there is something that we can learn from them, we should humbly learn from them. What do you think, second brother?" When Zhang Xiaohu heard this, his face turned slightly red and he said in a low voice, "What you say makes sense." However, he immediately put on a straight face and said, "But why are you participating in this martial arts competition? I know your martial arts foundation. If it's just to learn, you can let Captain He and the others teach you properly first. It won't be too late to participate after 3 to 5 years of practice. Who can you beat right now? How can you learn anything from it?" When it came to the results of the competition, Zhang Xiaohua didn't say anything more. After all, he was still a youth. When he reprimanded Zhang Xiaohu just now, he spoke with conviction. In fact, wasn't he the same as well? Otherwise, he wouldn't have wanted to be in the same group as those tall disciples. When Zhang Xiaohu saw that his younger brother wasn't speaking, his heart ached as he asked, "Did you not win a single match today?" Zhang Xiaohua could only nod his head. Zhang Xiaohu patted his head and comforted him. "It's okay, Xiaohua. Our foundation is weak and can't compare to them. Didn't I just say that as long as we have the heart to improve and cultivate hard? If we can't do it this year, there's still next year. If we can't do it next year, there's still the year after." When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, he vigorously nodded his head. Just as he was nodding his head, he heard Zhang Xiaohua's stomach rumble thunderously. Zhang Xiaohu smiled and said, "I was wondering why you ran over to my place. So you haven't eaten yet. Come, let's go and try our food." With that said, he pulled Zhang Xiaohua out of the small courtyard with his head held high. After eating, Zhang Xiaohua rubbed his stomach as if he hadn't had enough. He followed second brother to the tidy and lively main road of the Misty School. Zhang Xiaohu looked at his younger brother and was very happy. He smiled and asked, "Xiaohua, I remember that you like to eat red braised pork. Why didn't you eat more just now? Also, I feel that your appetite is a lot smaller than before. You're growing now, so you have to eat more." Zhang Xiaohua looked at the lush flowers and said, "Second brother, I don't know what's going on either. It's just that I feel like I'm full after eating for a while. Just like today, if it wasn't for the fact that the competition exhausted my energy, I would have eaten even less at night. The red braised pork tastes okay, but the more I eat, the more I get sick of it." Zhang Xiaohu thought for a moment and said, "Maybe it's because you eat better now, so you don't like to eat anymore. If it was at home, you would eat faster than anyone else." At the mention of home, the two brothers were a bit sad. Zhang Xiaohua asked in a small voice, "Second brother, I want to go home and take a look. What about you?" Zhang Xiaohu nodded and said, "I also want to. We've been out for more than a year, so we should go back and take a look. Although young Master Li has already reported back to the family that he's safe, Mom and Dad still miss us when they don't see us." Zhang Xiaohua looked at Zhang Xiaohu and said, "Then when can we go back?" Zhang Xiaohu thought for a moment and said, "Let's wait a bit. You should be able to go back at any time." Zhang Xiaohua quickly said, "Yes, I don't have much to do. It's just that a while ago I couldn't leave. Captain, he and the others are going to participate in the martial arts exhibition. So I'll keep an eye on the medicinal field for a while. After the martial arts exhibition, they'll go back and I'll be relaxed. I should be able to go back at any time." Zhang Xiaohu muttered, "I'm a bit troubled here. I've only just entered the Misty School, so I haven't fully grasped the habits of my master and the others. At first, they just let me familiarize myself with the environment of the school. I reckon that after the martial arts exhibition, they'll only be able to teach me specific martial arts. So, I don't dare to easily ask for leave from Master." Zhang Xiaohua nodded and said, "I know, second brother. How about I wait for you? When we go back, it's better if the two of us go back together. If one of us goes back alone, Mom and Dad will be even more worried." Zhang Xiaohu looked at Zhang Xiaohua with a slight smile and said, "Xiaohua, you've also grown up." Zhang Xiaohua proudly raised her little head and said, "That's right, second brother. I'm already 13 years old. Of course, I'm an adult." The two of them chatted like this as they walked back. When they were about to reach Zhang Xiaohu's residence, Zhang Xiaohua suddenly thought, "Second brother, do you know where the medicine hall is? I want to go see Captain, he, and Nie Xiaoer." Zhang Xiaohu looked at the sky and shook his head. "Forget it, don't go today. It's already late and they're all going to participate in the martial arts exhibition. They're probably cultivating right now. Even if you go, you won't be able to see them. You'll be disturbing them for no reason. Also, don't you have a competition tomorrow? You should go back and rest early. Rest well. Even if you lose tomorrow, you have to use all your strength to deal with it." "Ayo." Zhang Xiaohua cried out and said, "Second brother, I forgot that when I left Kitty Hawk Hall, Steward Su said that he had already reserved a room for me. I didn't ask clearly either. Can I not go back tonight? It's already so late. What should I do?" Zhang Xiaohu thought for a moment and said, "It's already so late. Who are you going to ask? I don't know where this Steward Su is, but I do know the general location of Kitty Hawk Hall. Forget it. I'll just make do with my place tonight. When I see them tomorrow, I'll properly explain." Zhang Xiaohua thought for a moment and nodded. "That's the only way. I hope there won't be any problems." The two brothers chatted as they returned to the small courtyard. Zhang Xiaohu hadn't received any teachings from his master yet. Presumably, Wenhai was thinking about what martial arts to teach Zhang Xiaohu. Moreover, Wenhai had already stopped Zhang Xiaohu from practicing the trash martial arts that he had learned at the Lotus Flower Escort Agency. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohu could only practice fist techniques and the like. Thus, the two of them each occupied a corner in the small courtyard and began to practice on their own. After Zhang Xiaohu finished practicing a set of fist techniques, he saw that Zhang Xiaohua was still practicing. He stood there with a chuckle and happily watched his younger brother practice. Very quickly, he discovered that Zhang Xiaohua was practicing that set of fist techniques over and over again. He felt that it was very strange, but immediately after, his heart was moved again, and he shouted, "Xiaohua, stop! Let's spar for a bit." Zhang Xiaohua paused for a moment and happily said, "Okay, second brother, wait a moment. I'll practice a few more times and then stop." After practicing enough times, that bone-tempering cold stream appeared and Zhang Xiaohua stopped. Zhang Xiaohu felt very strange and asked, "Xiaohua, why do you practice the same set of fist techniques over and over again?" Zhang Xiaohua didn't understand and said, "There's nothing strange about it. Second brother, I only know how to practice this set of fist techniques. If I don't practice it over and over again, what am I practicing?" Zhang Xiaohu explained, "You don't understand what I mean. I know that you only know this set of fist techniques. What I'm saying is, when I told you to stop, why didn't you stop? Instead, you practiced several times before stopping?" Zhang Xiaohua thought for a moment and said, "It's like this, second brother. When I practice this set of fist techniques to a certain number of times, there will be a cold stream flowing through the bones in my body. If I don't practice it to a certain level, it won't appear. That's why I have to practice it over and over again." Zhang Xiaohu's eyes widened and asked, "Really? This set of fist techniques that you put together?" Zhang Xiaohua listened to her small chest and proudly said, "Really, second brother, do you want me to teach you and you can try it?" Zhang Xiaohu didn't suspect that his brother was lying. However, Zhang Xiaohua was currently participating in the martial arts competition. Moreover, he had just entered Misty School and would probably be practicing new martial arts soon. Where would he have the time to practice other things? Thus, he could only shake his head and regretfully said, "Forget it. Right now, I don't have the time to learn more martial arts. Let's wait until Master teaches me Misty School's martial arts." Zhang Xiaohua didn't manage to show off her toy. She pouted and said, "All right then. When you want to learn, come find me." Then Zhang Xiaohua got into a stance and said, "Come, second brother, let me try your martial arts." When Zhang Xiaohu heard this, he was also happy. He rolled up his sleeves and said, "All right, watch my Liuhe fist." Thus, the two brothers stepped forward and began to spar. When the two brothers sparred, they naturally wanted to give way to each other. Zhang Xiaohu knew that Zhang Xiaohua didn't know how to use internal energy, so he didn't use any internal energy in his moves. On the other hand, Zhang Xiaohua knew that Zhang Xiaohu's strength wasn't as great as hers, so she only used 30% of her strength. In short, the two of them sparred harmoniously. Zhang Xiaohua didn't even use the ethereal steps. The two of them sparred for a while. Zhang Xiaohua was actually able to counter every move he made. He fought meticulously. Although Zhang Xiaohu was unable to gain the upper hand several times, he felt very gratified. He knew very well that his younger brother was actually not at a disadvantage in this fist technique. Naturally, he must have put in a lot of effort in his daily practice. The two of them sparred for a while. Zhang Xiaohu saw that it was getting late and stopped. He smiled and said, "Xiaohua, you've improved a lot. I almost can't beat you." Zhang Xiaohua's little tail stuck up. She smiled and said, "Don't you know whose brother I am? Can't I?" Zhang Xiaohu chuckled and said, "It's a pity that your internal energy isn't good enough. Otherwise, you could really exchange a few moves with those young Eagle Hall disciples." Zhang Xiaohua wasn't happy and said, "It's just that we didn't have this opportunity when we were young. Otherwise, I wouldn't be worse than them." Zhang Xiaohu comforted her and said, "Okay, let's not talk about this anymore. Slowly improve. There will always be time to catch up with them. Come on, let's go inside and sleep. It's late and you still have to participate in the competition tomorrow." Zhang Xiaohu's small courtyard wasn't small and the house wasn't small either. However, there was only one Kong in the house. As a last resort, the two of them could only squeeze together. In fact, it couldn't be said that they had no choice. Presumably, even if there were two Kong beds, the two brothers would still squeeze together. The two brothers whispered for a while on the Kong bed. When Zhang Xiaohu spoke again, there was no sound from the other side. Zhang Xiaohu kicked Zhang Xiaohua, but there was no response. He couldn't help but smile bitterly and say, "This kid is still sleeping as soundly as before." Thus, Zhang Xiaohu also closed his eyes. After a while, he peacefully fell asleep. In the whole house, there were two breathing sounds, one of which had a very strange frequency. It was Zhang Xiaohua's unique, 9 shallow, and 1 deep breathing. Zhang Xiaohua's carefree heart sutra quietly ran again when he was asleep. In the endless night sky, the ethereal star force came as expected and invisibly covered Zhang Xiaohua's whole body. It was slowly guided into the pores of his whole body and then into his meridians to be refined. Tonight's star force was also different from the past. The star force projected for a long time and even attracted a trace of chi of heaven and earth above the Misty School. Following the star force's trajectory, it was also guided into Zhang Xiaohua's body. The amount of chi of heaven and earth was also several times more than that of Huan Shivilla. It was guided into Zhang Xiaohua's pores by the star force. After being guided and refined by Zhang Xiaohua, it was constantly integrated into the genuine qi that was cheerfully flowing in his body. Every time the genuine qi flowed a circle, there would be a slight increase. Although the increase was insignificant, after a night of hard work by Zhang Xiaohua, he could feel a slight change. -1. Chapter 173. When he woke up in the morning, Zhang Xiaohu opened his eyes and saw an infinitely magnified face staring at him seriously. The corners of that face still had some excrement. Zhang Xiaohu was so scared that he didn't see who it was and hurriedly hid behind. When he was far away, he realized that it was his younger brother, Zhang Xiaohua. He was holding his chin and looking at him with a playful expression. Zhang Xiaohu hurriedly touched his face and rubbed his eyes. He asked, "Is there something on my face?" Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "There isn't anything on your face, but there is on your mouth." When Zhang Xiaohu heard this, he couldn't help but touch his mouth. He said in surprise, "How is that possible?" Zhang Xiaohua didn't directly answer his question. Instead, she said, "Second brother, what did you dream of yesterday?" "Dream?" Zhang Xiaohu slightly frowned and said, "No, I didn't dream of anything." "Hee, you haven't dreamed yet," Zhang Xiaohua said with a mischievous smile. "If you didn't dream, why did I hear you call someone's name?" "Who? Whose name? How come I don't know?" Zhang Xiaohu was still confused. His dream was vague. How could he remember so much? When Zhang Xiaohua heard that her second brother didn't admit it, she stood up and looked at the sunlight outside the window. She said seriously, "That's strange. This morning, someone in his dream called Junior Marshal Sister Changa. Junior Marshal Sister Changa. Could it be me?" Zhang Xiaohu's face suddenly turned red. He couldn't help but mutter, This, is it true?" Zhang Xiaohua said with a smile, "The ancients said that a gentle and graceful woman is a good match for a gentleman. It's nothing." Zhang Xiaohu's face turned red. He also didn't know what to say. Then he thought for a moment, clenched his teeth, and asked, "That Xiaohua, are you familiar with Junior Marshal Sister Changa?" Zhang Xiaohua tilted her head and thought for a moment before replying, "I don't know anyone that well. It's just that when I went out with the Manor Lord last time, we went together. We didn't talk much and just got acquainted with each other." "Oh, I see." Zhang Xiaohu was a little disappointed. Zhang Xiaohua blinked her eyes and said with a smile, "Although I'm not familiar with Junior Sister Changa, I'm very familiar with Hall Master Chin of Mingtui Hall." "Really?" Zhang Xiaohu was overjoyed, his eyes shining with hope. "Of course." Zhang Xiaohua declined to comment. After the two brothers finished their meal, Zhang Xiaohu was familiar with his younger brother's poor sense of direction. Since he had nothing to do anyway, He followed him to Kitty Hawk Hall. Just as they arrived at the main road in front of the hall, they ran into two acquaintances. It was Shang Guanyun and Yu Dei. Both of them didn't look good and were in the middle of whispering something. Zhang Xiaohu had already heard from Zhang Xiaohua last night, so he wasn't surprised to run into them here. He very naturally stepped forward and saluted them. Shang Guanyun and Yu Dei didn't neglect him either. They had already lost their arrogance at the Lotus Escort Agency and hurriedly returned the salute. Zhang Xiaohu knew that the two's performance yesterday wouldn't be ideal, so he didn't ask any questions. After exchanging greetings for a while, he went in. It wasn't easy for the two to run into Zhang Xiaohu, so how could he be willing to let them go? Leaving Zhang Xiaohua aside, he pulled on Zhang Xiaohu's sleeve and asked him about his recent situation. He also expressed his respect for him. Only then did he ask in a roundabout way how he had caught the discerning eyes of gang leader O. Zhang Xiaohu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He only answered perfunctorily. How could he be willing to tell the truth? Zhang Xiaohua, the instigator, was squeezed outside by the two. She was all smiles as she watched the two's performance. After talking for a while, Zhang Xiaohu coughed twice and said, "My two dear friends, it's already late. Why don't you hurry inside and make your preparations? There will be a competition in a while. Although you don't need to advance, this is a hard-won opportunity. You should cherish it and exchange pointers with my sect's disciples. It will be very beneficial for your future martial arts progress." Shang Guanyin smiled bitterly and said, "Brother Zhang is wrong. I didn't know before. If I had known that the martial arts competition would be so difficult, I wouldn't have come back even if you beat me to death. Yesterday I fought 3 rounds, but I didn't win a single one. I don't know where my face has gone. To tell the truth, if it wasn't for brother you holding me back, I would have returned to the Lotus Escort Agency yesterday." Yu Dei smiled and said, "Perhaps the strength of yesterday's opponent was too strong? Wouldn't it be even more unsightly if you were to withdraw after just 3 rounds? Let's wait and see today. Maybe there will be a change today." Shang Guanyin curled his lips and said, "Forget it. If I ran, then I ran. Who said anything about me? I didn't know either. What is there to lose face about? If I were to be thrown out of the ring by those little kids today, that would be the real shame." Zhang Xiaohu heard the two say this and was even more worried for Zhang Xiaohua. When he looked back, Zhang Xiaohua was looking around and didn't seem to care. He couldn't help but laugh at himself. This little brother of his had encountered many setbacks on the road of martial arts. Being thrown out of the ring was a small matter that he probably wouldn't take to heart. Under the urging of Zhang Xiaohu, the 2 martial arts masters of the Lotus Escort Agency, whose self-esteem had been greatly damaged yesterday, walked into the Young Eagle Hall step by step. As usual, the entrance of the Young Eagle Hall was guarded. Zhang Xiaohua and the other 2 all had number plates. Zhang Xiaohua didn't need to be said. Although she was much older than the disciples of the Young Eagle Hall, her height was about the same. The guards weren't good enough to see her age, so they passed after checking. Yu Dei and Shang Guanyin didn't look like disciples of the Young Eagle Hall at all. The guards naturally wouldn't let them in. Yu Dei could only tell them their identities. Fortunately, some of the guards knew about this matter that hadn't happened for decades, so they let them in. This small disturbance made Yu Dei and Shang Guanyun's expressions very unhappy. Zhang Xiaohu showed his waist token. When the guard saw the genuine waist token, he was flabbergasted. Where did this junior brother come from? Why didn't he compete at his own place during the martial arts exhibition? Why did he come to the Young Eagle Hall to watch the show? If he wanted to watch the show, then wouldn't the big arena at the entrance of the meeting hall be 100 times more lively? However, looking at the 2 foreign contestants who were much taller and older than the disciples of the Young Eagle Hall, he more or less understood what was going on. When he entered the Kitty Hawk Hall, he saw that the square was filled with children's heads. Zhang Xiaohu could not help but laugh. What he saw was just a few people sparring, and he already felt a sense of fear. Facing so many children whose martial arts were much higher than his, if he did not have a thick heart, it would not be easy to face them. Yu Dei and Shangguan Yun's thoughts were understandable. The three people's arenas weren't together, so Zhang Xiaohu naturally accompanied Zhang Xiaohua. The four people walked for a while and then cupped their hands in farewell. When Zhang Xiaohua arrived in front of her arena, team leader Chang and the others were almost all present. Zhang Xiaohu was afraid that his brother would make a mistake, so he went forward to greet the two team leaders and explained his identity. When the two team leaders heard that he was the direct disciple of the sect leader, they didn't dare to be negligent and quickly cupped their hands in return. In their hearts, they thought at the same time, inside story, there must be inside story. Zhang Xiaohu and the others naturally knew that he had entered the ethereal sect through nepotism. But today he had accompanied his younger brother who knew the ethereal steps to the Kitty Hawk Hall. Anyone would have thought that there might be some unspoken rules involved. Zhang Xiaohu didn't know that the two opposite him had thought so much in the blink of an eye. He sincerely explained to the two team leaders that Zhang Xiaohua had gone to look for him yesterday. He hadn't seen his brother for a long time, so he stayed to talk for a while. Because of the delay, he didn't ask for the room's location, so he could only stay at his place. He asked the two team leaders to bear with him. When the two team leaders saw this, they laughed in their hearts. How could they not sell such a cheap favor? They roughly explained the rules of the martial arts exhibition. It turned out that the rules of the martial arts exhibition were that many people came to the Lotus Escort Agency and Huanshu Manor. The Misty School usually arranged food and lodging, but these two places weren't very far from the Misty Mountain Villa. Many people were still willing to return to their own residences. Therefore, the martial arts exhibition didn't restrict those who had to stay at the Misty Mountain Villa. Even if Zhang Xiaohua had returned to the Huanshu Manor last night, it was still possible. But today, no one would go to the Huanshu Manor to pick him up. He had to arrive at the Young Eagle Hall on time, or else he would be disqualified. When Zhang Xiaohu heard this, his heart was relieved. Zhang Xiaohua beside him was overjoyed and said, "That's great. Then tonight we'll go to the medicine hall to look for team leader, he and the others." Zhang Xiaohu glared fiercely at him and said, "It won't be too late to talk about it after you win. If you still don't win, how can you face team leader he?" Zhang Xiaohua shrunk his neck and stuck out his little tongue, pretending to be afraid. Not long after, the second day of the martial arts exhibition officially began. According to the order of the number plates that had been arranged long ago, they went on stage one by one. Zhang Xiaohu suddenly asked, "Xiaohua, what's your number plate?" Zhang Xiaohua raised his number plate and said with a smile, "Number 250. Zhang Xiaohu curled his lips and secretly said in his heart, "This number is really 250. Then he asked again, "What about Yu Dei and Shangguan Yin?" Zhang Xiaohua said without hesitation, "Number 2 and number 111. Zhang Xiaohu nodded. Hee, how many numbers, really two? On the stage, the two children's fists and feet created wind as they fought. The thrilling scene made Zhang Xiaohu stunned. Was this still the martial arts of children who weren't even 10 years old? Why was it so much more powerful than the last time he saw it? However, after thinking for a bit, he understood. The fighting outside the stage was just to compare notes on martial arts. It didn't involve any benefits. Many of the unique skills and dangerous moves might not be used. But this martial arts exhibition competition really wanted to see the level of your martial arts. If he didn't show it now, when would he show it? Therefore, even if it wasn't a life and death battle, they would still go all out and not give in the slightest. The time it took for a stick of incense to burn passed quickly. The two people on the stage fought to a draw. Both of them were unconvinced and jumped off the stage, each taking 1 point. Zhang Xiaohua's number was at the end, so just like yesterday, his match was also at the end of each round. So he also stood beside Zhang Xiaohu and watched the competition on the stage. He didn't know how Zhang Xiaohua felt. Anyway, it wasn't just the first match. In the following 7 matches, there were wins and losses, but every match made Zhang Xiaohu feel relaxed and happy. The martial arts of these children were difficult for him to reach. It could be imagined that the depth of the bench of this misty school was very deep. Then he thought of the time when he and his younger brother rashly came to the Misty Mount Villa to learn martial arts. At that time, he really didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Looking at the children in front of him and thinking of himself at that time, how could they accept him? At the same time, he felt ashamed of his inferiority and looked at Zhang Xiaohua, who was watching the competition attentively. His heart was filled with endless warmth. If it wasn't for his younger brother, who he watched grow up from a baby boy, how could he enter the Misty School with such a high threshold? If he couldn't learn profound martial arts and gain a place in the Misty School where experts were everywhere, how could he face his younger brother? Suddenly, that shame was beaten away by his pride. He didn't have time to participate in the past of the Misty School, but the future of the Misty School was in front of him. He might as well give up his inferiority complex and shame and use his blood and sweat in exchange for unlimited hope in the future. Just as he was thinking, he heard Captain Chang call out, 250, come on stage. Zhang Xiaohu's heart skipped a beat. His younger brother was going to go on stage, but he didn't hold any hope in his heart. How could Zhang Xiaohua be a match for a competition that even he felt ashamed of his inferiority? Thinking of Zhang Xiaohua's embarrassment yesterday, he thought that he would be thrown off the stage not long after going on stage. Thus, Zhang Xiaohu moved his feet, preparing to find a good place to catch Zhang Xiaohua, who would be thrown off the stage. But before he moved, he saw that Zhang Xiaohua beside him didn't move either. He couldn't help but say curiously, Xiaohua, they're calling your number. It's your turn to go on stage. At this time, Zhang Xiaohua seemed to have just made up her mind. She turned around with a bright face and said with a smile, Second brother, come over and help me with something. Zhang Xiaohu asked curiously, help? What can I help you with? Don't tell me you want me to help you go on stage. Zhang Xiaohu hurriedly waved his hand, not to mention whether Kitty Hawk Hall was willing or not. Even if they agreed, he couldn't go up and embarrass himself. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, I'm not asking you to go on stage. I'm asking you to help me get on stage. Help you get on stage? Zhang Xiaohu was a little puzzled. But when he saw Zhang Xiaohua's opponent use a beautiful qinggong to leap onto the stage, he suddenly understood. With such a high stage, if no one helped, Zhang Xiaohua really wouldn't be able to go up. Zhang Xiaohu asked, Then how can I help you? How did you go up yesterday? Zhang Xiaohua looked askance at the two team leaders and said, Yesterday, Captain Chang threw me up. The first time, he actually threw me to the other side of the stage. Today, I can't let him help me. Second brother, help me. Just use your strength to throw me up. Use my strength? Zhang Xiaohu was greatly embarrassed. Brother, you're my blood-related brother. You can't harm people like this. You know that my internal strength isn't good. But you still want me to help you. Aren't you making me lose face? You could have just let the team leader throw me. Why did you change the rules? Seeing that Zhang Xiaohu still didn't move, Zhang Xiaohua was a little anxious. She tugged on his sleeve and said, It's okay, second brother. You can just throw me. Even if you throw me like yesterday, I won't blame you. Zhang Xiaohu had no choice but to bite his ear and explain the situation. When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she frowned and said in the same voice, So it's like this, second brother. So your internal strength hasn't reached that level yet. What should I do? Zhang Xiaohu was so angry that he almost wanted to cover Zhang Xiaohua's mouth with one hand and choke him to death with the other. Can't you be a little quieter? Can't you see that when I'm talking to you, I'm leaning close to your ear? Zhang Xiaohua didn't care about other people's gazes. After thinking for a bit, she said, How about this, second brother? Do you still remember when we used to steal bird eggs when we were young? Zhang Xiaohu was even more anxious. Why are you talking about stealing bird eggs now? He said in a bad mood, I remember. What about it? Zhang Xiaohua said, Then it's just like before. Can't I just stand on your shoulder? Zhang Xiaohu rolled his eyes at Zhang Xiaohua and said, "No. Can't I ask the team leader to go easy on you again?" Zhang Xiaohua stubbornly shook her head. Zhang Xiaohu saw that he couldn't win against her and could only accompany her to the front of the stage. The stage was about the height of a person. Zhang Xiaohua stood on Zhang Xiaohu's shoulder, and her hands just happened to be placed on the edge of the stage. She only saw Zhang Xiaohua's hands exerting force, and her small figure flew into the air with a pong sound. She then flipped a few hollow somersaults in the air before floating down to the ground. Zhang Xiaohua, this brat had the intention of showing off. What a joke! This young master didn't know Qigong. But this Qigong movement and Qigong techniques had been learned for 2 days. If she didn't use them, wouldn't others look down on her? Zhang Xiaohua's Qigong came from the ethereal steps. She also wanted to show off. Her posture was naturally graceful and elegant. When this brat leisurely landed on the ground, the crowd came back to their senses and thought, "What are you doing?" If you had used your Qigong from below the stage, everyone would have clapped their hands and praised you. However, looking at Zhang Xiaohu, who was gloomily walking back to the stage and trying to find a good angle to catch Zhang Xiaohua, how could they still praise you? Zhang Xiaohua closed her eyes and waited for a long time, not hearing the sound of clapping. She was very puzzled. At this time, she heard the child opposite her say, "This senior brother, are you feeling unwell? You've already closed your eyes for a long time." Zhang Xiaohua opened her eyes gloomily. It seemed that the performance just now was a waste. No one appreciated it. Her song was too high to be deceived. So she said in a bad mood, "Can't you see that I'm resting? Wait a moment more." In fact, Team Leader Chang, who was below the stage, had the same thoughts as him. The only difference was that Team Leader Chang thought, "This ethereal steps movement technique is so miraculous. Even a person who has never practiced Qigong can move so gracefully. If I were to practice it, what would happen?" He narrowed his eyes and looked at Zhang Xiaohu, who was not far away. He thought, this brat actually did not practice any internal cultivation technique. I wonder what kind of divine martial arts he practiced. Looks like I should have a good relationship with him. Team Leader Chang saw Zhang Xiaohu's unnatural expression and his eyes moved. He pulled over a disciple who had just competed and whispered a few words to him. That disciple was puzzled. He turned back to look at Zhang Xiaohua on the stage and quickly ran away. As for Zhang Xiaohu, he waited for Zhang Xiaohua to step on his shoulder and onto the stage before he slowly left the stage. He stole a glance at the people below the stage who had an expression of, "We don't know this person." He secretly wiped the sweat on his forehead. Sigh, how embarrassing. Luckily, there weren't many people here. Just as he was thinking, he heard someone beside him say, "Senior brother Zhang Xiaohu, what were you doing just now? Please add it to your collection. Thank you." -1. Chapter 174. What he was afraid of would come. As soon as Zhang Xiaohu heard this voice, he immediately shouted in his heart, "Oh no! How could he let this person see his embarrassment? What should he do?" While he was thinking, the person had come to his side. It was his junior sister Chang'e, whom he had just met last night. Chang'e was still dressed in tight clothes and looked valiant. Beside her, there was a petite girl with big round eyes and a round face with baby fat, which made people want to love her. At this moment, the round eyes that could speak were staring at Zhang Xiaohu strangely, with a doubtful expression. Zhang Xiaohu wanted to make up a lie, but facing Chang'e's face, he couldn't tell a lie at all. In fact, Zhang Xiaohu forgot that in this square full of children, many people had seen his actions. Chang'e had seen it carefully from a distance, so it would be troublesome if he lied. Zhang Xiaohu thought for a moment and then said, "Frankly, it's nothing. I'm helping my brother to get on the ring." The round-faced girl asked softly, "Do you need help to get on the ring? Can't you just jump up with light skills?" Zhang Xiaohu looked at Zhang Xiaohua, who had just stood on the ring, and said, "My brother doesn't know light skills." The round-faced girl said again, "Nonsense. You saw his posture when he just turned over and got on the ring. How can he not know light skills? Besides, that night by the river. Her words were really ambiguous. Zhang Xiaohu couldn't help narrowing his eyes. Was this his brother's acquaintance? At this time, Chang'e hurriedly interrupted the girl's words and said, "Chin Chin." The round-faced Chin Chin seemed to realize that she had let the cat out of the bag. She couldn't help but stick out her tongue and cover her mouth with her hand. Her expression was strange. Chang'e then introduced, "Senior brother, this is my junior sister. Her name is Chun Chin. She went out with Hall Master Qin last time." Oh! Zhang Xiaohu suddenly realized that this was also one of the companions who went south with Zhang Xiaohua. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohu cupped his fists and said, "Junior sister Chin Chin, I'm Zhang Xiaohu, Zhang Xiaohua's second brother." Chin Chin hurriedly cupped her fists and said, "I'm Chin Chin. Greetings, senior brother." Then she asked in disbelief, "Zhang Xiaohua, do you really not know Qinggong?" Zhang Xiaohu bitterly smiled and said, "Yes, he really doesn't know Qinggong. Yesterday he was thrown up on stage by Captain Chang using his internal strength." As soon as Zhang Xiaohu finished speaking, he regretted it. Why was he so talkative? He should have just said that he did not know Qinggong. Why did he have to explain what happened yesterday? Sure enough, when Chin Chin heard this, he immediately said, "Senior brother, then why don't you use your internal strength to throw him up?" What he was afraid of really happened. Zhang Xiaohu was a little embarrassed and said with a red face, "Well, my internal strength is not good enough, so I can't throw him up." Chin Chen was even more puzzled and said, "Senior brother, you seem to be lying. You are older than us and have practiced internal strength longer than us. You can't be so weak that you can't even do this. I can do this." Zhang Xiaohu was embarrassed and was about to explain when Chang'e beside him said, "Chin Chin, shut your mouth. No one will know that you are mute if you don't speak. If you ask again, I'll let you go back to Mingsui Hall now. In the future, I won't take you out. Brine and tofu, everything has its vanquisher." Chun Chin immediately shut her mouth and looked like an obedient child. Zhang Xiaohu's eyes were full of tears. What a bosom friend! She came to his rescue at the right time. If she asked again, he did not know how to answer. The more he looked at Chang'e, the more he liked her. She was really a considerate girl. Chang'e smiled at Zhang Xiaohu and said apologetically, "Senior brother, junior sister Chin Chin is like this. She likes to get to the bottom of things. I hope you don't mind." Zhang Xiaohu waved his hand repeatedly, indicating that he did not mind. But then Chang'e asked again, "Just now, Zhang Xiaohua's posture of stepping on your shoulder looked very skillful. I guess you must have been a human ladder for your younger brother a lot, right?" When Zhang Xiaohu heard this, he chuckled and told Chang'e about how the two brothers went to the woods together to dig out bird eggs when they were young. Chang'e listened with curiosity and yearning in her eyes. Beside her, Chen Chen's little face was also red and she was eager to ask something. It was pitiful to say that although the disciples of the Misty School, such as Chang'e, were all favored by God and enjoyed the wealth of the world and the excellent treatment, their lives were mainly about practicing martial arts. However, they had no chance to enjoy the interesting things of Zhang Xiaohua's childhood. How could Zhang Xiaohu's description not arouse the curiosity of Chang'e and Chin Chin? Zhang Xiaohu was talking and suddenly stopped. He thought of something and quickly turned back. Sure enough, on the arena, Zhang Xiaohua had already fought with her opponent. Zhang Xiaohu hurriedly said, "Junior sister Chang'e, let's not talk about other things first. After Xiaohua's competition, let's talk about it." Chang'e also hurriedly said, "Okay, senior brother, let's watch Zhang Xiaohua's competition first." Zhang Xiaohua nodded and then said, "Well, junior sister, you stay here and I'll go over there." Chang'e was surprised and asked, "Why don't you stay together?" Zhang Xiaohu said, "You stay here and I'll stay there. If Xiaohua is knocked off the arena, we can catch him. He doesn't know Qinggong, and I'm afraid that he will fall and break." Knocked off the arena? Chang'e was very surprised and said, "How is that possible? I've seen Zhang Xiaohua's martial arts. Even if he was lucky to meet her last time, as he said, he should be able to defeat a child in plain clothes. Impossible." Zhang Xiaohu said firmly, "Yesterday he said that he didn't win a single match. He must be embarrassed to say that because he was knocked off the arena." Seeing that the other's point of view was too different from theirs, they didn't know who to listen to. At this time, Chen Chun waved her hand aside, indicating that she had something to say. Chang'e nodded angrily and said, "If you have something to say, say it quickly. Don't be long-winded. Let's see Zhang Xiaohua's performance in the arena first, and then decide what to do." Chen Qin finished her words in one breath and then closed her mouth tightly. Zhang Xiaohu and Chang'e listened and nodded. They looked at each other and then looked at the arena. On the arena, Zhang Xiaohua was fighting fiercely with his opponent, and it was ridiculous. Yesterday, Zhang Xiaohua's opponent in the first round was Mu Tangchun. His internal strength was the best among the 9 children. According to him, yesterday he used all his internal strength in the last 3 punches without any reservation. But even so, he didn't gain any advantage against Zhang Xiaohua. Moreover, when he was talking with these friends last night, he repeatedly emphasized that Zhang Xiaohua's strength was not limited to this. He felt that Zhang Xiaohua still had at least 30% of his strength. This news was also confirmed by the other 2 children who fought with Zhang Xiaohua. Every time they fought with Zhang Xiaohua, their arms would be numb and their wrists would be sore because of Zhang Xiaohua. Therefore, today, when they fought with Zhang Xiaohua, they used 100% of their strength to fight with him. But as long as Zhang Xiaohua really used 100% of his strength to fight with them, they would immediately dodge. Therefore, on the arena, it was funny again. First of all, unlike Zhang Xiaohu's imagination, Zhang Xiaohua didn't have any strength to fight back. On the arena, Zhang Xiaohua and his opponent exchanged punches and kicks, and the fight was very lively. Even when Zhang Xiaohua was angry and used all of his strength to fight with his opponent would dodge and not take it head-on. Of course, it was also not what Chang'e imagined. Zhang Xiaohua was a wolf who could take advantage of everything. Although Zhang Xiaohua's strength was great and his fists were hard, his moves were limited and couldn't be compared to the Misty School's disciples. However, he also had his own way of defense. Whenever his opponent's moves were ingenious and he couldn't deal with it, Zhang Xiaohua would use ethereal steps to dodge and make his opponent miss all of his moves. As a result, there was such a funny situation on the arena. Whenever his opponent forced Zhang Xiaohua into a dead end, his opponent would immediately use lightness skill to dodge easily. And whenever Zhang Xiaohua was forced into a dead end by his opponent's ingenious moves, he would immediately use ethereal steps to dodge easily. As a result, when the time for an incense stick to burn was up, the 2 of them were still tied. This was the first time Chang'e and Qin Qin had seen such a bizarre and hilarious situation. They were truly astonished. Their faces were full of wonder and their hearts were filled with questions. Although the young man's fist technique was experienced and his footwork was profound, there was no internal force surging between his moves. His moves were also repetitive. If they went forward with a sword, they would certainly take his life within a few moves. Was this young man the same Zhang Xiaohua who saved many lives in the dark of night and killed a martial arts master with a single move? Zhang Xiaohu was even more incredulous. How was this possible? How could he not know Zhang Xiaohua's level as his brother? Last year, he was still recuperating in his room in the escort agency. His finger bones were shattered by Yu Dei's internal force. How could he be so powerful after not seeing him for a few days? Although Zhang Xiaohu was not good at martial arts, he had learned with Yu Dei in the martial arts training center in the escort agency. Naturally, he was aware of Yu Dei's level. None of these children in the Misty School were worse than Yu Dei. How could his brother, Zhang Xiaohua, be on par with them? Was this young man still his younger brother, who stood on his shoulder and dug out bird eggs when they were young? When Zhang Xiaohua lightly jumped down from the arena and went to greet Chang'e, the three of them came back to their senses. Chang'e looked at Zhang Xiaohua as if he had just woken up from a dream and quickly introduced Qin. Qin had gone to the south with Zhang Xiaohua, so Zhang Xiaohua naturally remembered her. However, at that time, Qin was a female disciple of Mingcue Hall and followed to protect Ouyang. How could she meet Zhang Xiaohua, who was like a servant? At this time, seeing her here, Zhang Xiaohua was also happy and quickly went forward to greet her. Qin's eyes were full of stars and her face was red. She shyly cupped her hands and saluted, but she also closed her mouth tightly and did not speak. There was a reason for Qin's reverence. Imagine that night, Qin was also by Chang'e's side and stabbed the old man in black. Qin's long sword also stabbed the old man's body, but it could not penetrate the old man's body. Instead, the old man grabbed the long sword and broke the tip of the sword. Zhang Xiaohua, when everyone was in despair, stepped forward and stabbed the old man's throat with one sword, saving Ouyang and everyone else. Although it was dark and Qin could not see it clearly, the fact was that it happened in front of her. How could such a heroic act not arouse the reverence of girls? Chang'e saw this and said with a smile, Qin, you can speak now. Hearing this, Qin did not immediately chatter like a baby swallow as Chang'e expected. Instead, she closed her mouth and smiled without saying a word. Zhang Xiaohu did not notice this. After seeing Zhang Xiaohua come over and salute Chang'e and Qin, he pulled Zhang Xiaohua and asked, Xiaohua, when did you become so powerful? Isn't that the boxing skill you put together by yourself? Why don't others dare to fight with you? And what's the footwork you use to dodge? Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, Second brother, don't you know what I am like? Didn't we also learn from each other last night? But now I am very strong, while they are still young and lack internal force, so they dare not fight with me directly. As for the footwork, you can ask Heroine about it later. Chang'e next to them was not happy and said, Zhang Xiaohua, you are not kind. It's just a footwork. Can't you tell us? Zhang Xiaohua smiled bitterly and whispered, Master, doesn't allow me to tell you. You can figure it out by yourselves. Hearing this, Chang'e and Qin immediately stopped smiling and did not dare to ask more. Seeing this, Zhang Xiaohua quickly whispered, Sister Chang'e, you can ask Hall Master Qin about this when you have a chance. She also knows it. Chang'e and Qin looked at each other and nodded. Zhang Xiaohua then asked, Sister Chang'e, why did you come so early today? I thought you would come in the afternoon. Chang'e said with a smile, This year I'm going to take part in the competition of the 7th rank in plain clothes. The number of female disciples in Mingcue Hall is limited and there are not many competitions. Yesterday, I basically got the points to advance and won another round this morning. I'm sure I can advance, so I asked for leave from Hall Master. Hall Master Qin heard that I was going to watch your competition and readily agreed. You see? Qin also pestered me and insisted on coming. Qin blushed and said, I just want to see how powerful you are. It was dark last time, so I didn't see clearly. Zhang Xiaohua was amused and asked, Are you disappointed when you see me today? Qin was straightforward and said, Yes, it seems that you can't even defeat me, a 5th rank commoner. Zhang Xiaohua smiled bitterly and said, It's true. It was a coincidence that day. It's true. At this time, Zhang Xiaohu's face was a little abnormal. He thought a lot in his mind. Chang'e looks younger than me, but now she is already at the 7th rank of commoner clothes. But I haven't practiced the mental cultivation method of internal strength. Even if I practice the 1st rank of commoner clothes, I am no match for her. Even now, it seems that even my brother can easily defeat me. I don't know when I can catch up with Chang'e and advance to the 7th rank of commoner clothes. I think that when I reach the 7th rank of commoner clothes, Chang'e will have already advanced to brocade clothes. Chang'e saw Zhang Xiaohua and Qin talking happily and couldn't help laughing. Then she noticed that Zhang Xiaohu lowered his head and didn't say anything. She felt strange and asked, Senior brother, what are you thinking about? Zhang Xiaohu raised his head and said with a forced smile, "Nothing. I'm just thinking about when I can take part in the martial arts exhibition and when I can advance to the 7th rank of commoner clothes. Junior sister apprentice Chang'e is so young, but her martial arts are much better than mine. I really don't know when I can catch up with you. My title of senior brother sounds really shameful." Chang'e smiled and said, "People have different experiences. If you concentrate on practicing martial arts like us, you won't have the fun of childhood that you just talked about. Since you already have such fun and still want our martial arts, what else do we have to be proud of? We have our differences and pride. This is the real life." Zhang Xiaohu understood and said, "Junior sister apprentice Chang'e said it so well. It's very philosophical." Chang'e chuckled and said, "This is what our hall master Qin said. I just changed it a little. Moreover, now that you've become martial uncle Wen's disciple, you should concentrate on practicing martial arts. You'll get something in the future if you work hard." Zhang Xiaohu nodded and said, "You're right. However, I always feel that my martial arts are not as good as yours. You call me senior brother, so I feel uneasy." Chang'e thought for a moment and said, "You're right. In fact, you always call me junior sister apprentice Chang'e. It sounds cumbersome. How about we call each other by their names?" Zhang Xiaohu clapped his hands and said, "That's good. I'll call you Chang'e. When my martial arts are as good as yours, it won't be too late to call you junior sister apprentice." Chang'e smiled and said, "Since you said so, I'll wait for the day when your martial arts catch up with mine." Zhang Xiaohu nodded firmly and said, "There will be such a day. Chang'e, wait for it." While the four of them were chatting below the stage, they did not forget about the competition on the stage. Chang'e and Chen had come from the 1st rank of commoners, so they had a unique vision. They would judge every competition, and they were very appreciative of these disciples. The male and female disciples of the ethereal sect were taught separately. The young female disciples were also taught in Mingsue Hall, not Kitty Hawk Hall. Usually, Chang'e and the others rarely came to Kitty Hawk Hall. But even so, Chang'e was very optimistic about this batch of disciples. He even thought that he did not have such strength at that time. On the stage, the competition without Zhang Xiaohua was very exciting. The 8 competitions had their own characteristics. Chang'e repeatedly sighed that the new generation was better than the old. She could not compete with them at that time. Soon after noon, it was time for Zhang Xiaohua to go on the stage. This time, Chang'e was present, so there was no need for Zhang Xiaohu to be a human ladder. After discussing with Chang'e, just as Chang'e was about to throw Zhang Xiaohua onto the stage, Leader Chang came over. He stopped Chang'e's action and said to Zhang Xiaohua with a smile, "Number 250, you don't need to ask others to help you anymore. I'll ask someone to bring a ladder. You can go on the stage from the side. It's not good to be thrown here and there like this. If Steward Su sees this, he will definitely blame you." When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she was overjoyed. How could she not use a ladder? Who would like the feeling of being grabbed by the neck and thrown into the sky? So, she hurriedly thanked Leader Chang and went on the stage from the side ladder. -1. Chapter 175. Zhang Xiaohua's opponent in this round seemed to be weaker than the previous rounds. He was also a little younger. In the previous rounds, he had lost more than he drew. He was probably the weakest in this group apart from Zhang Xiaohua. In the eyes of Chang'e and Qin, he should be able to defeat him in a few moves. Unfortunately, the one on the field now was Zhang Xiaohua, not a female disciple of Mingsue Hall. As a result, the same situation as the previous round appeared in the competition on the field. Although the disciple of Kitty Hawk Hall was the weakest, his fist technique, palm technique, and internal force were all remarkable. The most important thing was that his lightness skill was also good. In this situation, Zhang Xiaohua could only sigh. Alas, was this the legendary saying, "Not weak when encountering the strong, and not strong when encountering the weak"? Chang'e and Chen had this thought in their hearts at the same time. In this case, no matter what the outcome of the competition on the field was, the result had already been decided. Apart from the time it took to burn a stick of incense, the people in the audience really could not think of any other result. Watching Zhang Xiaohua's fists on the field brutally punching here and there, and his opponent using lightness skill to fly around, a phrase suddenly appeared in Changa's mind. A cow chewing on a peony. Yes, a cow chewing on a peony. It was Zhang Xiaohua, this cow, chewing on the peony that was the exquisite martial arts of Misty School. The martial arts of Misty School were so wonderful. All kinds of fist techniques, palm techniques, lightness skills, and other martial arts were extraordinary, like a beautiful peony in full bloom. When facing an opponent like Zhang Xiaohua, he did not use the same moves to fight the enemy. Instead, he used his brute force and a set of fist techniques to rush forward and force the opponent to dodge everywhere. When he encountered martial arts that he could not deal with, Zhang Xiaohua only had one word: dodge. After dodging for a while, he immediately used his brute force and fist techniques to continue ravaging his opponent. This kind of barbaric competition was completely different from the competition of the other young Eagle Hall disciples. If the others were competing through the blossoming of beauty, then he was displaying his strength through ravaging and destroying this beauty. Other than a cow chewing on peony, he really couldn't think of a better word to describe Zhang Xiaohua's martial arts competition. However, Zhang Xiaohua, this bull, truly had the strength to be called a bull. The strength of her arms was indescribable. Although there weren't many moves in the Big Dipper magical fist, there were only 108 moves. But in Zhang Xiaohua's hands, the ordinary became magical. Facing the various moves and techniques of the young Eagle Hall's disciples, she countered each move with the same principle and did not fall into a disadvantageous position. In fact, Chang'e and Chen Qin thought too highly of Zhang Xiaohua in their hearts. They had seen Zhang Xiaohua's amazing sword move and naturally thought that Zhang Xiaohua's martial arts were extraordinary, but they chose to forget it. How long had Zhang Xiaohua been practicing martial arts? How long had the disciples of the Misty School's Kitty Hawk Hall been practicing martial arts? How many martial arts resources did Zhang Xiaohua have? How many martial arts resources did the disciples of the Misty School's Kitty Hawk Hall have? None of these could be compared, because all of these, compared to the tall one and the short one and the big one and the small one in the ring, people couldn't remember. They could only feel that Zhang Xiaohua, who was taller than the others, was bullying the child opposite her. If Zhang Xiaohua won, then it should be, but if she didn't win, then it shouldn't be. Was it necessary to win just because she was older and taller? Of course not. At least Yu Dei and Shang Guanyin, who were in the same square, weren't like this. Shang Guanyin didn't need to be mentioned. She had lost 3 matches in a row yesterday, and today's 2 matches didn't seem to have improved. As for Yu Dei, she had accumulated 1 point yesterday with 2 draws and 1 loss. She thought that she would be able to rise steadily today, but unexpectedly, she met a strong opponent as soon as she went on the stage. She also lost 2 matches in a row and even lost yesterday's points. At this time, both of them drooped their heads like ostriches and shrank in the middle of a group of children. Today's decadence was the opposite of yesterday's. Yesterday, Shang Guanyin was abnormally decadent. He felt that it was a mistake for him to come here. But after last night's sleepless night, he truly recognized his own shortcomings. Although he had practiced martial arts for a few years in his hometown, he was still a wild fox and hadn't been taught seriously by others. In the Lotus Escort Agency's Martial Arts Training Center, although he had been taught seriously, studied seriously, and practiced diligently, it had only been a short time after all. Thus, he deeply understood that his losses were normal. If he won, it would be abnormal instead. He was fully prepared for today's loss. Losing 2 or 3 matches was something he could accept. After all, he couldn't compare to the group of talented children in the Misty School. His talent and resources were lacking. Yesterday, while Yu Dei was decadent, he also had a trace of excitement. After all, it was rare for him to have the opportunity to exchange pointers with a disciple from the Misty School, even if it was a commoner first-rank disciple. Yesterday's loss was just a moment of carelessness, or he had met an expert first. After a long night of rest, he was prepared to show off his skills today and beat him into a mess. Of course, it was inappropriate to bully the weak, but for the sake of his face, he couldn't care less. However, reality had taught him a solid lesson. Today's opponent was an expert, and yesterday's was just an appetizer. Thus, the greater the expectation, the greater the disappointment. Today's Deity was completely listless. Since Deity and Shang Guanyin had chosen the smaller accounts in the group, the third round of the competition had already begun when Zhang Xiaohua had just finished the second round of the competition. There was still no miracle in the third round. Deity persisted for more than half the round, but in the end he was forced off the stage by a series of attacks from his opponent. Deity jumped off the stage in a sorry state. Standing on the ground, he turned his head to look at the proud young man on the stage. Obviously that wasn't his stage. The one who let his hopes soar wasn't him, but the excited young man. Deity composed himself and looked down at the ground under his feet. It seemed that he had really come to the wrong place, as if he had already decided on something. Deity raised his head. His eyes were clear, and on the stage, the other dancers had already shown a new style. Deity was a little reluctant, but he was also determined. He slowly walked to the front of one of the team leaders and whispered something. When the team leader heard it, he didn't show any surprise or abnormality. It was as if Deity's words were within his expectations. After listening to Deity's words, the team leader nodded slightly and raised his head to look at the competition on the stage again. When Deity raised his hand to salute and prepared to leave, the team leader just waved his hand. Deity left. He was very determined to leave this stage that didn't belong to him. When he left the noisy crowd and walked towards the door, he heard someone calling him from behind. When he turned around, he saw that it was Shang Guanyin. Looking at Shang Guanyin's somewhat lonely expression, Deity smiled. He wasn't alone after all. Just like that, the two contestants from the Lotus Escort Agency left. They waved their hands and didn't take away any of the clouds that had caught their attention. Presumably, for a long time after this, there wouldn't be anyone from the Lotus Escort Agency coming to participate in the martial arts exhibition. Deity and Shang Guanyin didn't talk about the martial arts exhibition along the way. They also didn't have the mood to pay attention to or discuss the other wild card contestant, Zhang Xiaohua. Presumably, in their hearts, even someone of their level couldn't withstand a single blow. In their eyes, Zhang Xiaohua was like a country bumpkin. What could she do? She would probably be shot down from the sky as soon as she went on stage. The two of them only had one thought right now. What was that bastard Yu Luin thinking? He actually urged them to participate in some bullshit martial arts exhibition and made them lose face. When they got back, the first person they would deal with would be him. And Yu Luin, who was doing his best to flatter forth Masterwin, was sneezing incessantly. He was very puzzled as he asked himself, last night at the fragrance house, how could he have behaved himself? After all, the silver that Deity tipped him was spent sparingly. Not to mention that the two extras of the martial arts exhibition had finally realized that they had completed their mission and forfeited. In the square of Kitty Hawk Hall, the other extras didn't have any awareness of being a supporting character. He was very proud of himself as he bragged about his boxing skills to his sister, who worshipped him. In fact, if one were to talk about bragging, Zhang Xiaohua was a bit overboard. She didn't talk much, but she couldn't stand Chen Chen's incessant questioning. Zhang Xiaohua's Big Dipper magical fist was different from the current popular boxing skills, but it was also very similar. Chun Chin had also learned many of the moves. She was very curious as to how this somewhat mysterious young man in her heart could change the 108 moves into such a mess and yet still be so harmonious. Unable to withstand the repeated questioning of this curious baby, Zhang Xiaohua really didn't know how she had pieced it together. She could only deal with it tiredly. Therefore, under Chen Chen's deliberate flattery, Zhang Xiaohua's tail was raised a little. Could it be that she was really a legendary genius? Unlike Chun, who kept talking, Chang'e next to him was silent. It was not that she didn't like to talk, but Chun dominated Zhang Xiaohua, so Chang'e could only talk to Zhang Xiaohu. Chang'e didn't know much about Zhang Xiaohu, so she didn't know where to start. It was the same for Zhang Xiaohu. He knew nothing about Chang'e and couldn't find a topic to talk about, so there was an awkward silence. Both of them were watching the competition on the ring attentively. After watching for a while, Zhang Xiaohu frowned slightly. He leaned to Chang'e and asked, "Junior sister Chang'e, oh no, Chang'e, can you tell me about the martial arts moves of these two junior brothers on the ring? After all, I just joined the sect and don't know the martial arts of a sect. If I can take this opportunity to learn about the martial arts of our sect, I think it will be beneficial for my future practice." Hearing this, Chang'e smiled slightly. She didn't like this awkward situation. Hearing Zhang Xiaohu's question, she also aroused her desire to be a teacher. She pointed to the contestants on the ring and told Zhang Xiaohu in detail about the moves of each contestant, as well as the advantages and disadvantages of the moves. As a result, Zhang Xiaohu and Zhang Xiaohua enjoyed a memorable, perfect afternoon for the first time in history. When the sun was setting in the west, Zhang Xiaohua reluctantly stepped on the ladder again and made a business of trampling on other people's beautiful moves. The result was naturally speechless. The people under the ring were also stupefied as they watched the candles burn out little by little. They had lost interest in watching the competition. What a joke! They had watched 4 such competitions. In the first one, they were still amazed, and in the second one, they could still appreciate it. But they couldn't stand the same few moves again and again. Who would be surprised by it? Even when the two finished competing, the crowd was too lazy to applaud. It wasn't until Leader Chang announced that it was a draw that everyone resentfully dispersed. Zhang Xiaohu and the other 3 left fledgling Eagle Hall and walked to the fork in the road. Zhang Xiaohu naturally wanted to invite them to dinner together. In fact, when it came to dinner, it was just going to eat together in the dining hall. There were many disciples in the Misty School, so naturally there were many dining halls. For example, Mingcue Hall and fledgling Eagle Hall all had their own dining halls. As for direct disciples like Zhang Xiaohu, they also had their own dining halls. However, Chang'e didn't give him this opportunity. She only said that it wasn't convenient for them to go to a direct disciples' dining hall. Moreover, he hadn't returned to Mingcue Hall for a day and had to hurry back to see the results of the competition. In short, there were many reasons that rejected Zhang Xiaohu's good intentions. Zhang Xiaohu also didn't force them to stay. Everyone saluted and said goodbye. When Chang'e and Qin were far away, Zhang Xiaohu retracted his gaze. Then he slapped Zhang Xiaohua's shoulder and said with a smile, "Good boy, you actually lied to me yesterday." Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. He touched the shoulder that Zhang Xiaohu had slapped and pretended to be in pain. He grinned and said, "Second brother, how did I lie to you yesterday?" Zhang Xiaohu laughed and said, "You obviously didn't lose a single match yesterday. Why did you tell me that you lost? I comforted you for a long time yesterday and didn't dare to mention the competition. If I had known that you were so strong that you could draw 3 matches in a row in front of our Misty School's disciples, I would have made a big fuss yesterday." Zhang Xiaohua also said with a smile, "I didn't say that I lost. I just said that I didn't win. But that doesn't mean that I lost. A draw doesn't mean that I didn't win, right?" Zhang Xiaohu was stunned and said in his heart, "That's right. A draw doesn't mean that you didn't win. However, the difference between a draw and a loss is too big." Then Zhang Xiaohua said, "Moreover, I didn't win. This is a fact. It's not too late for you to be happy when I win tomorrow." Zhang Xiaohu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He wanted to say to him, "Forget it. You've only practiced martial arts for a few days. How can you compare with them?" But he didn't want to dispel his enthusiasm, so he had to say, "Well, let's see how good you are tomorrow. Don't draw again." Zhang Xiaohua patted his chest and said, "Second brother, let's see what I can do tomorrow." How could Zhang Xiaohu believe that? It would be strange if there was a second word in addition to the first word tomorrow. After a while, Zhang Xiaohua suddenly said, "Second brother, tomorrow is the last day of the martial arts exhibition. I guess we'll have to go back to the Huan Shi Villa tomorrow night. It's still early today. I want to see Captain He and the others. They must be almost done today. What do you think?" Zhang Xiaohu thought about it. Since Chang'e and the others had a lot of time to spend in the Kitty Eagle Hall today, He Tianshu and the others should also be done with the competition. So he nodded and walked in the direction of the pharmacy with Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohu naturally didn't know where the pharmacy was, but there was a path right under his nose. After asking around, he found the pharmacy. The location of the pharmacy was very strange. It was actually in the innermost part of the Misty Mountain Villa. It was a long journey from the Kitty Eagle Hall to the pharmacy. Along the way, he encountered many excited disciples. After all, it was a grand event that happened once a year. Many people had gained something. Moreover, many of the squares were dismantled. Presumably, they needed to be cleaned up after the competition. Lanterns and torches were lit in every small courtyard and square. It must be another noisy and orderly night. After walking for a long time according to other people's directions, there were fewer people. Then they came to a row of big blue walls. There was also a vermilion door that was wide open. There were several huge lanterns hanging in front of the door, shining on the golden words on the door. Pharmacy! Unlike the Kitty Eagle Hall, there were guards at the door of the pharmacy. The disciples who came in and out of the door had to verify their waist tags. It was still early in the night, and there were many disciples coming in and out. Looking at their habitual expressions, it must be a routine. Zhang Xiaohu brought Zhang Xiaohua to the door. When the guard saw that Zhang Xiaohu looked unfamiliar, he unconsciously became vigilant and went forward to stop them. Zhang Xiaohu did not find it strange and obediently showed his waist tag. Zhang Xiaohua did not have a waist tag and only handed over her martial arts exhibition number. The guard carefully looked at Zhang Xiaohu's waist tag and asked a few detailed questions before returning it. However, after looking at Zhang Xiaohua's number, he shook his head and said, "This little brother, the martial arts exhibition number only shows that you can participate in the competition. It does not show your identity. Do you have a waist tag?" Zhang Xiaohua had an idea and patted her head. Didn't she still have the waist tag of Huan Shi Mountain Villa? Since the last time she returned to the villa, Chiu Tong gave her a waist tag and said that in the future, she did not need to take the waist tag from the guard to go out of the Huan Shi Mountain Villa. She had long forgotten about it. She had also heard from He Tianshu that she could enter the Misty Mountain Villa with the waist tag of Huan Shi Mountain Villa. How could she forget? So she quickly found the waist tag of Huan Shi Mountain Villa and handed it over. The guard took it and carefully looked at it. He smiled and said, "Little brother, you are here to participate in the martial arts exhibition at Huan Shi Mountain Villa, right?" Zhang Xiaohua quickly nodded and said yes. But the guard still looked regretful and said, "This waist tag of Huan Shi Mountain Villa naturally allows you to enter our Misty School. Unfortunately, the pharmacy hall is an important place in the school. Other than the pharmacy hall's disciples and core disciples, others are not allowed to casually enter. Although little brother's waist tag can prove your identity, you can't enter." When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she became anxious and said, "Is the pharmacy hall very important? I just want to see Captain He Tianshu, that's all." The guard still looked helpless and said, "It's not that I don't want to help you. Little brother, we do have this rule. Unless you have a special permission tag issued by our pharmacy hall's elders or above. Otherwise, even if He Tianshu comes to pick you up in person, it won't work." Zhang Xiaohua was depressed. She just came to see He Tianshu, Nia Xiao Er, and the others. Why was it so troublesome? Forget it. She'd better go back to her second brother. "Please collect it, thank you." -1. Chapter 176. Zhang Xiaohu saw that Zhang Xiaohua was unhappy, so he said to the guard, "Then can I go in?" The guard said, "Of course you can." Zhang Xiaohu said to Zhang Xiaohua, "Xiaohua, wait here for a while. I'll go in and find Captain He." Zhang Xiaohua said, "Forget it, second brother. If you don't let me in, then I won't. Anyway, the martial arts competition will end tomorrow. When I return to the Huanxi Mountain Villa, I'll still be able to see him. I just want to take a look at the pharmacy today. Since you don't let me in, then I'll go back." Zhang Xiaohu knew that his younger brother wanted to go in, and his eyes were full of disappointment. In fact, Zhang Xiaohua was still a teenager. There was nothing interesting about the pharmacy. He came all the way here, but he was rejected at the door. His curiosity grew stronger. Whether he went in or not wasn't a problem. However, Zhang Xiaohu didn't want to disappoint his younger brother. After all, he was also a disciple of the Misty School. In his own territory, he wanted Zhang Xiaohua to have her wish fulfilled. He smiled and patted Zhang Xiaohua's shoulder, saying, "I'll go in and find Captain He. You wait by the door for a moment." Zhang Xiaohua opened her mouth, wanting to stop her second brother. However, Zhang Xiaohu didn't say anything. He turned around and asked the guard where He Tianshu lived. Thus, Zhang Xiaohua could only scratch her head and obediently stand to the side. The guard gave a simple description of the general location. Zhang Xiaohu turned around and nodded at Zhang Xiaohua before entering the door. Zhang Xiaohu went in for a long time, but didn't come out. Zhang Xiaohua was a little bored and wandered around the entrance of the pharmacy. At this time, the sky was already dark. There were even fewer people going in and out of the pharmacy. As Zhang Xiaohua was walking, she happened to see a middle-aged man coming back from afar. He was walking towards the entrance of the pharmacy. With the light from afar, Zhang Xiaohua found that person familiar. However, she couldn't remember who he was. She didn't care. She only knew a few people in the Misty School. Perhaps she was mistaken. That person also noticed Zhang Xiaohua. Think about it. In front of the empty door, there was only a teenager strolling around. It was impossible not to notice him. The person just glanced at him at first and didn't care. He continued to walk forward. However, after a few steps, he seemed to think of something. He stared at Zhang Xiaohua for a while and frowned slightly. At this time, Zhang Xiaohua didn't notice this. She had already turned around and strolled in another direction. That person was slightly annoyed when he saw that Zhang Xiaohua didn't come forward to greet him. When he walked to the entrance, he pulled a long face and scolded the guard. "How do you do things? How can you let an outsider stroll around the door?" An outsider? The guard was a little surprised. He quickly looked out and saw a lonely figure strolling outside. The guard smiled apologetically and said, "Deacon Chung, that teenager isn't a disciple of our Misty School. But he's not an outsider either. He's from the Huanxi Manor. He's not an outsider." It would have been fine if he did not hear those words. However, upon hearing those words, that attendant Chang grew even more furious. He loudly berated, "What? Who told you that the people from the Huanxi Manor aren't outsiders? Don't tell me that the people from the Huanxi Manor are disciples of the Misty School?" The guard was very surprised. He didn't know if there was anything wrong with what he said. He had received instructions that the Huanxi Manor's token could allow him to enter the Misty Manor, but not the pharmacy. Besides, what's wrong with that teenager strolling in front of your pharmacy? Don't tell me he's trying to rape you? Even if he's trying to rape you, he hasn't done it yet. What right do you have to drive him away? However, the guard still said, cautiously, "Deacon Chung, this one doesn't care if the people from the Huanxi Manor are from the Misty School. This one's duty is to guard this door. Any outsider who doesn't meet the rules can't be allowed to enter. As for whether there are people strolling around or fighting outside the door, it has nothing to do with this one." At this time, Zhang Xiaohua also strolled to the door again. Seeing the middle-aged man arguing with the guard, she was very curious and came over. Deacon Chang was annoyed that he had been rebuffed. He raised his voice and said, "What? How dare you talk to me like that? You." The guard was also angry. He took a step closer and said, "What about me? Deacon Chang." Hearing the words Deacon Chang, Zhang Xiaohua's mind lit up. She immediately remembered. Wasn't this middle-aged man one of the people who came to the Huanxi Manor to inspect the medicine fields last year? Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but feel happy. She walked forward with a smile on her face and saluted. Marshal Uncle Chong, how are you? Do you still remember me? Deacon Chong had nowhere to vent his anger. Although the guard was only a gatekeeper, he wasn't under the management of the pharmacy. Even if his position was higher than his, he didn't have the authority to give orders. Now that he was humiliated by the guard, he could only swallow his anger. This Zhang Xiaohua just happened to come over and hit the muzzle. Deacon Chong fiercely glared at Zhang Xiaohua. He spat out a mouthful of thick phlegm and said, Who is your martial uncle? Why don't you take a good look in the mirror? Do you have the qualifications to be my nephew? Why didn't you stay in the Huan Shi Manor to look after the fields? Why did you come to our Misty School? Don't you know if this is the place you should come? After saying that, he flicked his sleeves and turned to go in. Seeing this, the guard shouted, Deacon Chong, how can you be so unethical? Didn't sect leader always advocate the slogan of cleanliness and hygiene? How can you spit everywhere? Be careful, or I'll punish you. Deacon Chong, who had walked far away, paused for a moment. He didn't stop and walked straight away. In front of the gate, only Zhang Xiaohua was left standing there alone. Tears were rolling in her eyes and almost flowed down. She really didn't know how she had offended this so-called martial uncle. She had only seen him once in the Huan Shi Manor. This was only the second time. She just came to greet him. How could he treat her like this? Could it be that this was the legendary hot face stuck to a cold, but... Seeing Zhang Xiaohua's appearance, the guard didn't know how to comfort her. Today, Deacon Chong was also strange. He wasn't like this on a normal day. Why did he dislike this young man so much? However, the dispute between her and Deacon Chong today was also caused by this young man. Indeed, there were secrets that she didn't know. Putting aside the fact that Zhang Xiaohua was bullied for the time being, when Zhang Xiaohu walked through the gate of the pharmacy hall, the gate of the pharmacy hall wasn't like the Young Eagle Hall. After entering, there was a large square. Instead, there was a screen wall with a large number of flowers, birds, insects, and fish carved on it. After turning around the screen wall, there was also a large area. There were many ancient trees that couldn't be hugged by one person. In the dark night, the wind blew and the leaves rustled. The gap between the ancient trees was very wide and there was a flat road to pass through. Zhang Xiaohu walked inside according to the guard's instructions. After walking for a while, it was even quieter inside. In the dark night, he could vaguely see the shadow of the mountain peak. Zhang Xiaohu suddenly understood. No wonder he had walked so far. The pharmacy hall was actually on the mountain peak behind the manor. At this time, someone happened to come over in front. Zhang Xiaohu confirmed He Tianchu's position again. When the person heard that he was looking for He Tianchu, he smiled and said, It's not appropriate to look for him in his room at this time. He passed the competition today and is in the training room. When Zhang Xiaohu heard this, he quickly inquired about the location of the training room. The person thought for a while and said, The training room is still some distance from here. Our pharmacy hall is built on the mountain. The path is not easy to find. I'll take you there. When Zhang Xiaohu heard this, he thanked him again and again. Sure enough, the training room was not close to this place. There were many twists and turns, and he had walked quite a distance. Moreover, the key point was that the pharmacy built on the mountain was not flat. If Zhang Xiaohu had walked on his own, it would have been really difficult to find it. Along the way, the two people chatted casually. Zhang Xiaohu couldn't help but ask curiously, It's already so late. Why is He Tianchu still in the training room? The person smiled and said, It's all because of the martial arts competition. This He Tianchu hasn't advanced for several years, and he didn't mix well in the pharmacy hall. That was why he was sent to Huan Shi Manor to look after the medicinal field. Who knows where he learned the ethereal steps? This time he actually passed 2 stages in a row. In the morning, he actually beat Chang Biao down from the arena. Chang Biao entered the Misty School with He Tianchu. The two of them have always been competing openly and secretly. He Tianchu has never gained the upper hand. Chang Biao is already a deacon, but He Tianshu is only a captain. As a matter of fact, He Tianshu won the competition today. Many dissatisfied senior and junior brothers dragged him to the training room, wanting to have a good spar with him. Ethereal steps? Zhang Xiaohu's heart skipped a beat. Could it be that the extremely useful movement technique that Zhang Xiaohua used during the day was the ethereal steps? It must be so. His younger brother was with He Tianshu all day. He Tianshu probably imparted it to him. Sure enough, when they arrived at the training room, the usually quiet training room was still bustling with people. He Tianshu's somewhat arrogant and hearty laughter could be heard from inside. It seemed that this guy had won a lot of people today. The two of them entered and saw many people standing in the open space of the training room. There were 2 people in the field, and the winner had already been decided. One was He Tianshu, and the other was a slightly younger man. That man was climbing up from the ground and scolded with a smile. "Old He, I told you to be a little merciful. Why did you still kick me down?" He Tianshu smiled and said, "Forget it. Didn't I just learn it? I can't control my body. Besides, you usually throw me to the ground many times. Today, I'm just taking a little revenge." That person clicked his tongue and praised. "This ethereal steps is indeed miraculous. Previously you weren't my match, but now I'm not your match. A scholar who has been away for 3 days must be looked at with new eyes. It's exactly to describe you." He Tianshu cupped his hands and said, "It's just as I'm still a beginner. I'm far from being a direct disciple." Just as they were talking, they saw Zhang Xiaohu follow that person in. He Tianshu couldn't help but be stunned. He hurriedly walked out of the field and asked in surprise, "Zhang Xiaohu, are you here to look for me?" Zhang Xiaohu bowed and said, "Yes, Captain He. I brought Xiaohua to see you." "Zhang Xiaohua? Where is he?" He Tianshu looked behind him. Zhang Xiaohu said, "There's no need to look. He can't come in. He's still waiting for you at the entrance." Only then did He Tianshu come to a realization. He patted his forehead and turned back and said, "Brothers, I have a friend here. Let's end it here for today. Let's spar again in the future." When everyone heard this, they dispersed in an uproar. Zhang Xiaohu smiled and said to He Tianshu, "Captain He, you're feeling proud." He Tianshu said embarrassedly, "It's nothing. It's just that they saw me win against Senior Chang in the morning and found it strange. That's why they insisted on sparring with me. I had no choice." Zhang Xiaohu said, "Let's go out quickly. I'm sure Xiaohua is waiting anxiously at the entrance." When He Tianshu heard this, he hurriedly followed him out. When they reached the corner, he suddenly stopped and said, "If I go over like this, I'll only see Zhang Xiaohua once. He can't come in. Come on, you might as well come with me to the hall master and ask for a waste token so that Zhang Xiaohua can come in and see our pharmacy hall." When Zhang Xiaohu heard this, he hesitated and said, "Won't it take too long? Xiaohua has been waiting outside for a long time." He Tianshu tugged on his sleeve and said, "Let's go. I know this little brother of yours well. He just wanted to take a look at the pharmacy hall and see how we grow herbs. Otherwise, why would he think of coming to see me? Moreover, the martial arts exhibition is only a few days away. Won't he still be able to see me when he returns to Huanshu Manor?" Zhang Xiaohu chuckled and didn't answer. He followed He Tianshu in another direction. After walking for a while, they came to a rather large courtyard. There were also disciples guarding the door. He Tianshu went forward and asked in a low voice, "Is the hall master inside?" The disciple hurriedly saluted and said, "Martial Uncle He, the hall master, is inside. There are also elders." "That's right, Martial Uncle Chang also just went in." As he said this, the corners of his mouth curled up into a smile. He Tianshu slapped him on the head and said, "You little brat, what's so funny? Don't talk about flowers behind us." The disciple touched his head and said, "Martial Uncle He, I didn't say anything. Anyway, you had a great time winning this morning. We were all happy for you." He Tianshu said, "You bunch of brats who only want to see the world in chaos." Although his tone was a little angry, there was some happiness on his face. After saying this, he led Zhang Xiaohu into the courtyard. Before He Tianshu and Zhang Xiaohu could enter the hall, they heard Deacon Chang's voice from the hall. "Hall master, am I right? Who is that Zhang Xiaohua? He's just a servant from the Huan Shi Manor. How can he sneak into our Misty School with the Huan Shi Manor's token? He's even strolling around the entrance of our pharmacy hall. What is he doing? Why does he have to come to our pharmacy hall of all places? Does he have any ulterior motives? Our pharmacy hall is an important place in the sect. If he steals something out, we won't be able to explain it to the higher-ups. I saw him sneaking around the entrance and wanted the guards to drive him away, but the guards actually spoke up for him. Don't you think this is a classic example of collusion? Hall master, you have to be careful. Quickly replace that guard." When Zhang Xiaohu heard this, anger rose from his heart. Who is this Chang in the hall? How dare he talk about my brother like this? He couldn't help but quicken his pace. Seeing this, He Tianshu quickly pulled his sleeve and whispered, "Don't worry, listen to me." Zhang Xiaohu looked at He Tianshu, who was also angry and could only nod his head. He Tianshu led Zhang Xiaohu to the entrance of the hall. He didn't break in, but stood there quietly. Hall Master Bai of the pharmacy hall was sitting on a chair in the hall, slowly sipping tea. Beside him was Elder He, whose hair and beard were all white. Deacon Chang was standing in the middle of the hall, gesticulating as he spoke. Deacon Chang said again, "This Zhang Xiaohua has been with He Tianshu in Huan Shi Mountain Villa. I don't know what they are doing, but even the seeds of the herbs won't germinate. He Tianshu seems to be very protective of this manservant. He even wants to let him read the books in the pharmacy hall. Why doesn't he think that a manservant actually wants to enter the pharmacy hall through a side door? Why doesn't he look at his own virtue?" Hall Master Bai looked up and saw He Tianshu. He put down his teacup and said with a smile, "He Tianshu, why are you free to come here? Weren't you surrounded by that group of boys to compare notes?" Deacon Chang heard this and quickly stopped talking. When he looked back, he saw He Tianshu and Zhang Xiaohu staring at him fiercely. He couldn't help but feel a little uncomfortable and murmured, "He Tianshu, I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about the manservant in Huan Shi Mountain Villa." He Tianshu ignored him and went forward to greet Hall Master Bai and Elder He. Zhang Xiaohu behind him also hurried forward and said, "Junior Zhang Xiaohu greets Hall Master Bai and Elder He." In fact, Zhang Xiaohu didn't know how to address the two people in the hall, so he could only call them juniors. Hall Master Bai had seen Zhang Xiaohu in the hall when he entered the Misty School and knew that he was Wen Wenhai's disciple. Elder, he also saw Zhang Xiaohu at the apprenticeship ceremony later and knew of his identity. Therefore, he didn't dare to slight him. He bowed slightly and let Zhang Xiaohu sit on the chair below. Hearing Zhang Xiaohu's name, Deacon Chang's heart thumped. He thought to himself, "Does this Zhang Xiaohu have something to do with Zhang Xiaohua?" However, he immediately thought, the pharmacy hall can't be entered by non-pharmacy disciples and core disciples. This person isn't from the pharmacy hall, so he's naturally a core disciple. Since he's a core disciple, he won't have anything to do with a manservant in Huan Shi Mountain Villa. He immediately relaxed. He Tianshu stood next to Chang Biao and ignored him. He only said to Hall Master Bai, "Hall Master, a friend of mine wants to visit the pharmacy hall. You've seen this person before. It's Zhang Xiaohua from Huan Shi Mountain Villa. Can you give him a waist token and let him in?" Chang Biao heard this and immediately objected. "Junior brother this Zhang Xiaohua is just a manservant in Huan Shi Mountain Villa. Although he's very close to you in the villa, our pharmacy hall is an important place in the sect. How can we just let him in? If something happens, can you bear the responsibility?" He Tianshu looked at him with a smile and said, "Senior brother Chang, let's not talk about Zhang Xiaohua's identity first. Regardless of whether he's a manservant in Huan Shi Mountain Villa or not, I just want to ask, On what basis do you think he has ulterior motives and wants to come to the pharmacy hall to steal chickens and dogs for a living? -1. Chapter 177. Zhang Xiaohu also narrowed his eyes and stared at him coldly. Chang Biao looked a little embarrassed and said, "Since junior brother he heard it, I don't want to hide it anymore. When I came back, I saw Zhang Xiaohua loitering outside the door. Who knew that he was looking for you? Moreover, this is the time of the martial arts exhibition. There are people coming and going. It's inevitable that some rascals will sneak in. Our pharmacy is an important place in the sect. Of course, I have to be careful. I told the guard to be careful, but he said that I was meddling. How can I not be angry? I came back to remind you for the sake of our pharmacy. If anything happens, it's hard to say in front of the Grand Gang leader." He Tianshu was so angry that he laughed and said, "Don't you know Zhang Xiaohua? If he's lacking in morals, how can the Huanqi manor keep him? Moreover, he's always with me. Anyone who has a brain and isn't a mess should know that he's looking for me when they see him at the entrance of the pharmacy." Chang Biao sneered and said, "Junior brother, you're bringing trouble to yourself. Who can say that someone you know at the entrance is looking for you? So, you should be held responsible for what anyone you know does in the pharmacy." He Tianshu was about to refute when Hall Master Bai said, "You two don't have to quarrel. Tianshu, take this token and bring Zhang Xiaohua in. Except for the forbidden area in the pharmacy, he can visit the other places." After that, Hall Master Bai took out a token and was about to hand it to He Tianshu. Chang Biao heard this and immediately became anxious. Nonsense, he had complained for a long time. If the token was given, he would have wasted his efforts. Chang Biao said, "Hall Master, please don't do this. Our pharmacy is the most important. How can we let an irrelevant person visit? If anything happens, we can't take responsibility." Hall Master Bai was furious. He thought to himself, "You lost to He Tianshu in the morning, so you're angry and came to me to complain. I'll just treat it as a psychological adjustment and give you a free consultation. I'll accept it, but you can't stop me from making a decision." Moreover, he couldn't directly tell Chang Biao about Boss O's impression of Zhang Xiaohua. Hall Chief Bai had clearly seen Boss O's attitude toward Zhang Xiaohua in the meeting hall. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that Zhang Xiaohua was O Yan's savior. O Yan's position in O Peng's heart was well known by the entire Misty School. O Peng only had one younger sister, and he was afraid that she would fall and melt in his mouth. Although O Peng had already stated in the meeting hall that he had repaid Zhang Xiaohua for saving his life, after all, Zhang Xiaohua had saved his life. This matter had already happened and would never be erased. Zhang Xiaohua's position had already been set. It was impossible to change it. If Zhang Xiaohua had any evil intentions towards the pharmacy, he wouldn't believe it even if he was beaten to death. Just as Hall Master Bai was about to reprimand Chang Biao, Zhang Xiaohu next to him stood up and said, "I'm here to vouch for Zhang Xiaohua. I'll take full responsibility for his actions in the pharmacy." Chang Biao's heart skipped a beat. This person was really related to Zhang Xiaohua. After Zhang Xiaohu finished speaking, he cupped his hands towards Chang Biao and said, "I'm Zhang Xiaohu. I'm a disciple of Master O's disciple, Wenwenhai. This Zhang Xiaohua is my younger brother." When Chang Biao heard this, it was as if he was struck by lightning. His face turned pale, and he secretly complained, "How did this Zhang Xiaohua suddenly turn over a new leaf?" An ugly chicken leaped onto a branch. He actually has the older brother of a master's direct disciple. What should I do? How did I offend a direct disciple for no reason? Sigh. Chang Biao's thoughts turned, and he immediately put on a smiling face and said, "I owe Marshal Nephew Zhang. This is the first time we've met. Nice to meet you. I really didn't know that Zhang Xiaohua was your younger brother. It's a misunderstanding. Just now I was a bit presumptuous. If I knew earlier that Zhang Xiaohua had this kind of relationship with our Misty School, I would have personally come to ask Hall Master for this token." This guy's face changed really quickly. Everyone in the hall had the same thought at this time. Since Chang Biao didn't stop him, He Tianshu took the token and quickly went to pick up Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohu had been looking for him for quite some time, and he wasted a lot of time at Hall Master Bai's place. Presumably, Zhang Xiaohua was already annoyed waiting outside. When He Tianshu and Zhang Xiaohu took the token and rushed out, Chang Biao finally calmed down. He opened his mouth to say something, but he couldn't say anything. He could only cup his hands towards Hall Master Bai and Elder He and leave alone. After Chang Biao left, Elder He, who hadn't said anything all this time, asked in confusion, "Old Bai, this Chang Biao has been narrow-minded for a long time. His martial arts have always been superior to He Tianshu's. This time he was suddenly defeated, so he must be feeling terrible." Hall Master Bai frowned and said, "I know. That's why I didn't interrupt him even after he talked for so long. I wanted him to say it to his heart's content." Elder, he continued, "He Tianshu's popularity in our pharmacy hall isn't that good, so Chang Biao wouldn't have come to cause trouble. Chang Biao was caught bad-mouthing He Tianshu's friend, so this is Chang Biao's fault. In order to comfort He Tianshu, I can understand why you gave that Zhang Xiaohua token. However, although that Zhang Xiaohu is the direct disciple of the Grand Faction Master, he has just entered the sect. You don't have to give his disciple so much face. Other than a few forbidden areas, you can visit all the pharmacy hall's territories as you wish." Hall Master Bai smiled bitterly. This elder, he wasn't an outsider. He had built this pharmacy hall together with him for many years. He was truly trustworthy, but there were many things inside that a person like him shouldn't know. Thus, Hall Master Bai lowered his voice and said, "Do you know why He Tianshu was able to defeat Chang Biao?" Elder, he frowned and said, "Isn't it just learning the ethereal steps? It's not like I don't recognize it." Hall Master Bai continued to ask, "Then, do you know why he was able to learn the ethereal steps?" Elder, he said, "Isn't it because of the reward for He Tianshu's trip to the south?" Hall Master Bai smiled mysteriously and asked again, "Then shouldn't that stone cow Enchin and that Landong be rewarded? Why didn't they learn the ethereal steps?" Elder, he was stunned and said, "This, when you put it that way, it's true." Hall Master Bai smiled and said even more carefully, "It's because of that Zhang Xiaohua that He Tianshu was so lucky to learn our sect's ethereal steps." Elder, he was even more astonished and asked, "Did He Tianshu tell you this?" Hall Master Bai drank a mouthful of tea and said leisurely, "I saw him executed earlier and interrogated him in detail. He stammered and refused to speak the truth. He only said that it was Grand Gang leader O's grace. His words vaguely pointed out that it was related to Zhang Xiaohua." Oh, only then did Elder he understand. Then Hall Master Bai said another sentence which was like 1,000-pound stone thrown into Elder his heart lake. Furthermore, Zhang Xiaohu was able to enter Wen Wenhai's tutelage because of Zhang Xiaohua. When Elder he heard that, he couldn't help but be shocked and said, "This? How is this possible?" Hall Master Bai waved his hand and looked as though he knew what was going on and wasn't alarmed at all. Elder he was convinced. As expected of a Hall Master, he was really strong. He Tianshu led Zhang Xiaohu all the way to the entrance of the medicine hall and saw a small figure sitting obediently on the steps in front of the door. She didn't move at all, and no one knew what she was thinking about. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua's back, Zhang Xiaohu shouted in a low voice, "Xiaohua!" When Zhang Xiaohua heard her second brother shout, she immediately jumped up from the steps. Her originally gloomy face instantly revealed a smile, and she shouted cheerfully, "Second brother, you're finally back." Then she also saw He Tianshu and shouted, "Captain He, you're finally out. Your medicine hall is really hard to enter." He Tianshu smiled and said, "It's your fault for not coming earlier. Moreover, I didn't know you would come. You fought in the arena for an entire day. Aren't you tired? Why didn't you go to your second brother's place to rest and prepare for tomorrow's competition? Why did you come here?" Zhang Xiaohua said, "I haven't seen Captain He for a few days. I missed you, so I came to take a look." He Tianchu patted her little head and said, "You have a sweet mouth. Let's go in and take a look. This is the place where I grew up." Zhang Xiaohua looked at the guard at the door and said, "Forget it. It's too difficult to enter your medicine hall. Just now, someone wanted to drive me away." "Drive you away?" He Tianchu was stunned and then asked, "Is it the one surnamed Chang you met in Huanqi Mountain Villa? Tell me about him." Zhang Xiaohua nodded and told him what had happened just now. He Tianchu was angry. He had heard Chang Biao's words from Hall Master by just now. He thought that Chang Biao was just making things up in front of Hall Master Bai. He didn't expect that Chang Biao would really scold Zhang Xiaohua in front of him. At this time, He Tianchu's chest was about to explode. "You're an adult. Even if you're angry, you can't treat a child like this." Zhang Xiaohua saw that He Tianchu was unhappy and quickly said, "Captain He, it's okay. This martial Uncle Chang hasn't seen me for a long time and probably forgot about me." He Tianchu gritted his teeth and said, "Don't call him martial uncle. You're not a disciple of the Misty School. If you're happy, just call him Chang Biao. If you're unhappy, just ignore him." Zhang Xiaohua didn't understand and looked at her second brother. Zhang Xiaohu also looked unhappy and didn't say anything. He Tianchu pulled her hand and said, "Let's go. Since he won't let you in, we'll go in." Zhang Xiaohua quickly pulled her hand back and said, "Don't, Captain He. The guard said that no one is allowed to enter without the hall master's token. Let's not cause trouble." He Tianchu took out the token from his chest and said with a smile, "Let's go, Zhang Xiaohua. I've already brought this token for you. Today, you can openly enter this door and look around the medicine hall." "Look around?" Zhang Xiaohua didn't understand and said, "It's already so late and I still have to look around." "Ah." Hearing this, He Tianchu and Zhang Xiaohu were both stunned. They looked at each other and laughed out loud. That's right, the sky was almost completely dark. Even if there were lanterns and torches in the medicine hall, how could they see clearly? The two of them were angry with Chang Biao and forgot about this. He Tianchu held the token and thought for a moment before saying, "How about this, Zhang Xiaohua? Since we've already brought this token, you can go in and take a look. Also, our medicine hall is quite far from where your second brother lives. It's already late, so why don't you go in and take a look? You can stay in the medicine hall tonight." Zhang Xiaohua didn't care. Didn't it matter where she stayed? He glanced at Zhang Xiaohu. Zhang Xiaohu thought for a moment and said, "That's fine too. Xiaohua, since we're here, let's go in and take a look. We can't let people say that we can't enter the medicine hall, right? We'll stay here tonight and let people know that not only did we enter the medicine hall, but we'll also stay for the night. Let's see if anything happens to the medicine hall." When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she was very happy and said loudly, "Let's go, let's go." After saying that, He Tianchu took the token and handed it to the guard to check. Then he led the two of them into the medicine hall with their heads held high. The layout of the medicine hall was actually similar to that of Huanqi Mountain Villa. There were different small courtyards. However, there were many disciples in the medicine hall. The different courtyards were many times bigger than that of Huanqi Mountain Villa. Zhang Xiaohua listened to He Tianchu's introduction of the library, medicine hall, medicine refining room, practice room, and other places. Then she looked at the splendid courtyard walls and the brightly lit buildings. Countless little stars twinkled in Zhang Xiaohua's eyes. It was really very imposing. She really wanted to read books and practice martial arts inside. Zhang Xiaohua had been to the Misty Mountain Villa twice. Once, she went directly to the conference hall and the library. The other time, she went to Zhang Xiaohu's residence, the real place where the disciples of the Misty School lived. Today was the first time she came here. Naturally, she was very curious and envious. She kept saying in her heart that this trip was not in vain. In addition to the tall buildings used by the disciples, the medicine hall also had many fields planted with medicinal herbs. However, there were not many fields planted with medicinal herbs. It was hard to see clearly in the dark. Zhang Xiaohua felt a little strange and asked, "Captain He, Are there only so many medicinal herbs in the medicine hall? Although I can't see clearly, why do I feel that it is not much more than that of Huan Shi Mountain Villa? He Tianshu listened and said with a smile, "The medicinal fields we are looking at now are only used by the disciples of the medicine hall for experiments. The real medicinal fields are not here." "Then where is it?" Zhang Xiaohua felt a little strange. He Tianshu did not answer, but asked, "Guess!" Zhang Xiaohua tilted her head and thought for a moment. Then she pointed to the dark mountain next to them and asked tentatively, "Is it on the mountain next to us?" He Tianshu clapped and praised. "Yes, Zhang Xiaohua, you are really smart." Zhang Xiaohua was embarrassed and said, "It's nothing. When I was at the Guozhuang house, I farmed on the hillside. Naturally, I know a little." He Tianshu suddenly said, "There is such a thing. No wonder you know." Zhang Xiaohua said regretfully, "Alas, it is a pity that it is at night. Otherwise, I really want to see that vast medicinal field." He Tianshu said mysteriously, "If it is not at night, can you see it during the day?" "During the day?" Zhang Xiaohua and Zhang Xiaohu were a little puzzled. He Tianshu whispered, "I don't have any competition tomorrow. If I have time, I will go and watch your competition. When you are done, you can come and watch." Zhang Xiaohua said, "Don't you need to return that token tomorrow? Besides, it'll be dark by the time I'm done with the competition." He Tianshu said, "It is fine. If it is not tomorrow, there is still the day after. In any case, this token will not be returned to the hall master." Zhang Xiaohua almost jumped up and said, "Really? Then let me use it in the future. Don't return it." He Tianshu said, "Forget it. It is fine if you use it for a few days, but it is not suitable for a long time." Zhang Xiaohu chuckled and said, "Xiaohua is probably just joking. Why does he come to the pharmacy every day?" Zhang Xiaohua chuckled and did not answer. Thus, the three of them chatted and laughed as they walked along the small path. When they reached a fork in the road, Zhang Xiaohua walked along the path that went up the mountain and went inside. When He Tianshu saw this, he hurriedly pulled him and said, "You can't go down this path." Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. He looked into the darkness and asked, "Why?" Because along the way, Zhang Xiaohua had been walking blindly in front. He Tianshu did not stop him. After all, he had grown up here. It did not matter where he went. He could always come back in the end. He Tianshu also looked at the dark end of the small path and said, "That path goes up the mountain. We can't see anything at night. Why go there?" Zhang Xiaohua heard the difference and said softly, "Captain, wasn't there a path up the mountain just now? Didn't you not stop me? Why did you stop me on this path? What is the difference between this mountain path and that one?" He Tianshu coughed twice and said, "Well, there is indeed a difference." But He Tianshu looked like he was in a difficult position. Although Zhang Xiaohu could not see He Tianshu's face clearly, he heard his tone and hurriedly said, "Captain He, it's okay. If there is a problem, we won't go over. Anyway, it's already dark. Let's quickly find a place to stay." He Tianshu thought for a moment and explained, "It's like this. This small path leads to a forbidden area in the mountains behind our Misty School. Not only can the two of you not go near it, but even I have never been there before. Forbidden area." Zhang Xiaohua and Zhang Xiaohu could not help but cry out, "What is a forbidden area?" He Tianshu hurriedly stopped them and said, "Can the two of you be quieter? I can't stand being scared. If Hall Master Bai finds out that I brought the two of you to a forbidden area, he will definitely scold me." Zhang Xiaohua and He Tianshu hurriedly said softly, "We understand. Be quiet." He Tianshu also said softly, "This forbidden area is a place where no one is allowed to go near. In other words, the disciples of our Misty School are forbidden to go to this place. Whoever goes, they will be violating the rules and will be punished by the rules." Zhang Xiaohua's curiosity was piqued, and she asked softly, "Then do you know what is in this forbidden area?" He Tianshu glared at him and said, "Since people are forbidden to go in, naturally they don't want people to know what is inside." "How would I know?" Zhang Xiaohua's gossipy nature was suddenly awakened, and she asked, "Then there must be some gossip about this forbidden area." -1. Chapter 178. He Tianchu was surprised and asked, "How do you know that there are rumors in this forbidden area?" Zhang Xiaohua said mysteriously, "It's all written in the book. Anything that prevents people from exploring will always arouse people's curiosity. The more you obstruct and cover it up, the more information there will be about it." He Tianchu smiled and said, "The book is really vivid. However, it seems that no one dares to explore this forbidden area. Of course, there are indeed a lot of rumors." Zhang Xiaohua quickly pricked up her ears, wanting to satisfy her curiosity. Unfortunately, he Tianchu sighed and said, "But you're not a disciple of the Misty School. I can't tell you these things. Just give up on this idea." Zhang Xiaohua complained, "Captain He, if you don't want to say it, just say that there isn't. Now that you mention it, I'm always thinking about it. Can I still sleep at night?" He Tianchu shook his head and said, "No matter if there is or not, I can't tell you. Besides, if you can't sleep, even ghosts won't believe it." Zhang Xiaohua saw that He Tianchu refused to say anything. Naturally, she knew the severity of the matter. She scolded Zhang Xiaohua, "Xiaohua, don't be naughty. Since Captain, he said, so there must be some difficulties. Why do you have to make it difficult for him?" Zhang Xiaohua said resentfully, "I was just joking. I wanted to test Captain He's principles and see if he can withstand the test. He's a disciple that Boss O can trust." Thus, the three of them left the fork in the road while talking. Zhang Xiaohua still didn't give up and looked back at the end of the mysterious path in the distance. The three of them walked along the path and casually looked around for a while before He Tianchu led them to an exquisite, small courtyard. He said, "This is the guest room of the pharmacy hall. Let me take you in. There seems to be no one in the courtyard right now. Just find a place to stay. I might as well stay here and accompany you." Zhang Xiaohu felt bad and said, "Captain He, you should go back to your place. We can take care of ourselves." He Tianchu shook his head and said, "It's better if I don't go back. Didn't you see it just now? When these people saw that I won today, they were all unconvinced and wanted to challenge me. I defeated a bunch of them in the training room. So I'm sure there are many people waiting for me there. I can't afford to offend them, but can't I just hide? I'm definitely staying here tonight." Zhang Xiaohu had seen the scene in the training room and knew that what He Tianchu said was true. He smiled and nodded. Zhang Xiaohua was naturally happy as well. There were many rooms in the small courtyard. He Tianchu asked, "Do you two brothers live together or separately?" Zhang Xiaohua said first, "Of course we live together. I haven't lived with my second brother for a long time. I slept very soundly last night." Zhang Xiaohu thought of Zhang Xiaohua's question this morning. He was really afraid that he would say something in his sleep again. So he said, "Forget it, Xiaohua. You've grown up now. You can live by yourself in the future. Don't you live alone in Huanqi Villa?" Zhang Xiaohua was not willing to do that. She just said no, and Zhang Xiaohu insisted. Suddenly, Zhang Xiaohua seemed to think of something and said quickly, "Second brother, I lied to you this morning when I said that you called Chang'e. You didn't say anything at all. Besides, I slept so soundly at night. How could I hear you?" But how could Zhang Xiaohu believe her words now? He Tianchu also felt strange when he heard them mention Chang'e. So, at Zhang Xiaohu's insistence, the three of them each found a guest room and rested. It was getting late. Outside the small courtyard, the sound of insects kept rising and falling. In the empty guest room in the small courtyard, only the three of them were doing different things. Zhang Xiaohu was lying on the Kong with his hands behind his head. The expression on his face was either happy or sad. His eyes were fixed on the roof. The shadow of the roof flickered with the flickering light. No one knew what he was thinking. He Tianchu was sitting cross-legged on the Kong with his hands and palms facing the sky. He was practicing and regulating his qi circulation. Although he wanted to calm down, the victory during the day always disturbed his practice. After several failed attempts, he completely gave up. He lay on the Kong with his clothes on and a smile on his face. He must be recalling his previous victory. Zhang Xiaohua also walked back and forth in the room a few times. Then she got on the Kong, sat cross-legged, and practiced the Worry-Free Heart Sutra. In the beginning, Zhang Xiaohua did not draw qi into her body. She just refined the genuine qi in her meridians. Because it seemed that she had not found the qi of heaven and earth in other places except for the medicine field in Huanxi Mountain Villa, Zhang Xiaohua naturally did not have any expectations here. However, after the genuine qi ran for several cycles, Zhang Xiaohua still habitually drew qi into her body. When she used her perception to explore the outside world, she was pleasantly surprised to find that the qi of heaven and earth here was frightening. It was several times more than the medicine field in Huanxi Mountain Villa. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua opened all the pores on her body without hesitation and tried her best to draw the rare qi of heaven and earth into her body. Soon, the qi of heaven and earth around her was completely absorbed by her black hole-like body. Then she felt that there was a lot of qi of heaven and earth coming to her from all directions. Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed. She calmed down, and her state of mind was as calm as an ancient well. She steadily drew qi into her body and refined it in her meridians. Midnight came as promised. Zhang Xiaohua fell asleep in an instant. That breath-like flickering still matched the strange frequency and resonated with the stars in the night sky. Immediately, endless starlight surrounded Zhang Xiaohua and was drawn into her body in an orderly manner and gradually refined. For a long time, Zhang Xiaohua had encountered many problems when practicing Carefree Heart Sutra. Even the simplest method of drawing qi into her body was difficult for her. At first, she thought that it was because of her aptitude that she could not feel the qi. But later, when she practiced in the medicine field and in the woods, which were completely different, a trace of doubt arose in her heart. Perhaps the qi of heaven and earth was also different from the place. Although this was what he thought, and he had also encountered a dense yuan qi of heaven and earth on that rainy night, the Carefree Heart Sutra did not have any explanation for this. This made him even more puzzled. What was this Heart Sutra? It was the crystallization of the predecessor's experience. If such a simple thing was not recorded, how could others practice according to it? At least, there should be a note at the side. Now, in the guest room of the pharmacy hall, Zhang Xiaohua faced this problem again. Once again, she was sure that one sentence of Carefree Heart Sutra was not equivalent to 10,000 sentences. The qi of heaven and earth was indeed related to the place of practice. It was not described in the Heart Sutra that the qi of heaven and earth was endlessly scattered between heaven and earth. Because although the qi of heaven and earth in the guest room of the pharmacy hall was many times more than that in the medicine field of Huanxi Villa, the qi of heaven and earth in the medicine field was, after all, too little. The qi of heaven and earth in the pharmacy hall was also calculated according to the qi of heaven and earth. Compared to the theoretical description, it was far, far away. Since she had come to this conclusion, Zhang Xiaohua's first thought when she woke up in the morning was to think of the token in He Tianqu's hand. If she had this token, wouldn't her daily practice be much stronger than in Huanxi Villa? Today was already the third day of the martial arts exhibition. Besides the fact that there were too many children in fledgling Eagle Hall, the other competitions in other places had also ended. Naturally, He Tianqu had no other choice. Although Zhang Xiaohua did not acknowledge him as her master, she was still very close to becoming his disciple. If she wanted to compete as her cheat master, he still had to watch. When he saw Zhang Xiaohua yesterday, He Tianqu did not ask about the results of the competition. This was because he had the same mentality as Zhang Xiaohu. After all, he was from fledgling Eagle Hall and understood the strength of those children better than Zhang Xiaohua. He knew that Zhang Xiaohua was far from being their opponent. He had only come to participate in the martial arts exhibition for fun. Even though Zhang Xiaohua had already learned a little of the ethereal steps Qigong technique and a little of the ethereal steps movement technique, In He Tianqu's mind, Zhang Xiaohua had only learned a little of the concept of the ethereal steps. Naturally, he did not have any extravagant hopes for her. Therefore, he did not think that Zhang Xiaohua would have any good results in the competition. Of course, a result of 6 draws was definitely not a good result. Zhang Xiaohua would not show it off in front of He Tianqiu. In fact, when He Tianqiu came over in the morning and told Zhang Xiaohua that he wanted to go with Zhang Xiaohu to watch Zhang Xiaohua's competition, Zhang Xiaohua said embarrassedly, "Team leader He, you have a lot of things to do in the pharmacy hall. You should be busy with the pharmacy hall's matters. My competition is really nothing to see. You shouldn't go." Hearing this, He Tianqiu was even more certain of his thoughts. He thought to himself, "I've seen this kid get beaten up a lot by others. If he had a 30% chance of winning, he wouldn't be so noisy and pull me over?" Thinking of this, He Tianqiu said seriously, "That won't do. Zhang Xiaohua, no matter what, I can still be considered your first teacher. How can I not watch you compete? Even if it's just a glance at your improvement, I'll be gratified. My efforts were not in vain. If there are any shortcomings, I can teach you properly later. Don't you think so?" Zhang Xiaohua thought to herself, "Where did your efforts come from? Don't talk about the fist technique. You haven't even finished teaching the footwork of the Misty School, let alone the fist technique." However, seeing He Tianqiu's insistence, she could only say, "All right." But He Tianqiu still wouldn't let her go. He Tianqiu turned around and raised his eyebrows. "Oh, right, I forgot. Nie Xiao Er and the others don't seem to have anything going on today. Why don't I pull them over to cheer you on?" Zhang Xiaohua was shocked and hurriedly said, "There's no need, Captain He. It's not good to trouble them." Just as she was about to pull He Tianqiu's sleeve, who knew that He Tianqiu was already prepared. With a tap of his foot, he used the ethereal steps qigong and slipped away, leaving only a sentence in the air. "No trouble. They're happy." As a result, when they came out of the medicine hall, other than Zhang Xiaohua, there were also 4 other people, including Zhang Xiaohu, He Tianqiu, and Nie Xiao Er. The group of 7 people majestically charged towards the Young Eagle Hall. The disciples of the Misty School, who saw them along the way, were very surprised. The competition was already over. Who were they looking for trouble with? The disciples of the Misty School all came from the Young Eagle Hall and naturally knew that there was still one last day for the competition of the Young Eagle Hall. However, every disciple of the Misty School had participated in the competition of the Young Eagle Hall. Of course, no one was interested. For decades, there had never been an older disciple who came to watch the competition of the Young Eagle Hall. Yesterday, Zhang Xiaohua's competition was watched by Zhang Xiaohu, Chang'e, and Qinchin. Not only were the 2 team leaders of Zhang Xiaohua surprised, but the team leaders and disciples in the nearby arenas were also surprised. Today's competition had not officially started yet when they saw Zhang Xiaohua leading 6 adult disciples behind her over. The disciples of the Young Eagle Hall, who did not know the truth, began whispering. Zhang Xiaohua's ears and eyes were sharp, and she had already understood. It was nothing more than, "See, I've said it before. Where it's possible to make mistakes, one should be lenient. Don't always kick people around like a ball. Look at this. Someone must have lost yesterday and is borrowing people today to get back at them. I know what you mean. If you want to kick them, then so be it. But before you kick them, you have to inquire about the opponent's background. You see, they have someone backing them up in the sect. Isn't this bad? Look, it's probably this kid in front. He must have lost miserably yesterday and is looking for someone to back him up today. He's afraid of being beaten up again. Quickly go find Steward Sue and say that someone is coming to make trouble. Xiao Er, yesterday you secretly ate a drumstick in the kitchen. Look, they're here to catch you." What the hell? Zhang Xiaohua did not know whether to laugh or cry. Team leader Chang was also dumbfounded. You can't play like this. Yesterday, 3 people came to watch the competition. Today, there are only 6 people. That's almost more than our contestants. What are you doing? Haven't you seen enough of the Young Eagle Hall's competition? Alas, How could he know that this group of people did not have any good intentions? They were all here to see how Zhang Xiaohua would be kicked out of the arena. Otherwise, how could the 5 people's wretched smiling faces cause team leader Chang to misunderstand? Fortunately, Tianshu was still somewhat experienced and knowledgeable. Seeing that team leader Chang's expression was not good, he quickly explained that he was from the pharmacy hall and had taught Zhang Xiaohua martial arts. Today he came to take a look. The other few also practiced fist techniques with Zhang Xiaohua. But how could team leader Chang believe him? He secretly said in his heart, "Who are you trying to fool? How could I not know Zhang Xiaohua's martial arts footwork? You're from the pharmacy hall, how could you teach it?" However, the martial arts competition was not restricted to onlookers. Team leader Chang could not say anything and only nodded. Not long after, the time arrived. The competition on the last day of the Young Eagle Hall's martial arts competition officially began. On the arena, the 2 youths' fists and feet danced, attacking and defending well. Everyone below the arena watched with rapt attention. Only Zhang Xiaohu was somewhat absent-minded. From time to time he would look at the door and secretly say in his heart, why hasn't she come yet? Yesterday, I didn't hear that she wasn't coming today. Could it be that after seeing my embarrassing state yesterday, she didn't want to come today? Did I say something yesterday that made her angry? Or was it presumptuous of me to invite her to dinner yesterday? Did she think that because I don't know internal strength and my martial arts are not good enough, she didn't want to come today? Alas, in short, strange thoughts emerged in his mind from time to time. There was only one purpose, which was to explain why Changge did not come to the Young Eagle Hall today. Just as Zhang Xiaohu's imagination was running wild, several matches had already been fought on the arena. As for how many matches, Zhang Xiaohu naturally could not tell us. At the end of a match, a child was kicked off the arena by his opponent. Leader Chang announced the result. The other 2 contestants each used their qinggong and floated onto the arena. Everyone praised them. Just as Zhang Xiaohu's attention was slightly shifted to the match on the arena, he heard a beautiful female voice in the distance say, "Hall Master, it's over there. Look, it's the arena with the most people. And yes, it's the one with a lot of tall disciples over there. There's also a disciple who is stupidly watching the match, who is close to the arena." Zhang Xiaohu immediately felt that the sky had just brightened and his mood had just woken up. He cheerfully wanted to turn his head and walk away, but his face was flushed purple. With great difficulty, he restrained himself. After waiting for a few moments, which felt like several eras, he pretended to inadvertently turn his eyes and just happened to see Changge and a middle-aged woman who was accompanied by Changge walking over not far away. And, oh, there was no end. Even if there was, Zhang Xiaohu would not be able to see it. He immediately put on a happy expression and took a few steps forward. He stepped forward and saluted. "This humble one is Zhang Xiaohu. Greetings, Hall Master Qin." Wasn't the middle-aged woman accompanying Changge the bright green Hall's Aunt Qin? Aunt Qin returned the salute slightly and said with a smile, "Zhang Xiaohu, how are you? We've met before in the conference hall and at your apprenticeship ceremony. There's no need to be polite. I just came to watch Zhang Xiaohua's competition. Yesterday, Changge told me about Zhang Xiaohua's competition. I was very curious, so I came to watch." Zhang Xiaohu smiled and made a gesture of invitation. He said, "Xiaohua came to compete for fun. Sorry for disturbing Hall Master Qin's time." Aunt Qin waved her hand and said, "It's okay. The initial competition of the martial arts exhibition is over. There's nothing to do in the hall for the time being, so I came to watch. I also think highly of Zhang Xiaohua, so I came to cheer him on." After she finished speaking, she walked to the arena first. However, when she passed by Zhang Xiaohu, she said with a smile, "Oh right, I also liked the story you told yesterday about the bird egg." Zhang Xiaohu was prepared to salute Changge in a serious manner. But when he heard this, his face turned a little red, and his saluting posture was a little awkward. Changge was generous. He saluted with a smile and said, Zhang Xiaohu, the story you told was very good. How about you tell me more when you have time in the future? There was no reason for Zhang Xiaohu not to be happy. Naturally, he was overjoyed. Even his mouth was crooked from smiling. He said repeatedly, "Of course, if Chang'e is willing to listen, I'll be happy to tell you." Chang'e felt strange and asked, "Zhang Xiaohu, you were fine just now. Why is your mouth crooked now? Could it be that you're smiling crookedly? Please collect it, thank you." -1. Chapter 179. Zhang Xiaohua and the others were focused on watching the competition in the arena. The square was noisy, and they didn't pay attention to the entrance, so they naturally didn't know about Zhang Xiaohua's actions. It wasn't until Aunt Qin and the others walked to their side that they noticed. After everyone greeted each other, Aunt Qin asked, "Zhang Xiaohua, is it time for you to go on stage?" Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "Soon, it should be after this match." Aunt Qin nodded and said, "We're here to cheer for you." Behind Aunt Qin, there were about 5 or 6 female disciples, including Chang'e, Qin Chen, and the others. They all cheered for Zhang Xiaohua. These female disciples were the ones who went to the south with the caravan last time. Although they went together last time, Zhang Xiaohua looked like a manservant at that time, so naturally no one paid attention to her. It wasn't until the battle at night that the female disciples had a whole new level of respect for her. Later, when Zhang Xiaohua disappeared, they returned to Mingsui Hall. They had always been very curious about this youth. Yesterday, when they heard that Zhang Xiaohua participated in Kitty Hawk Hall's caught-in clothing competition and ended in a draw, they became even more curious. Today, they pestered Aunt Qin and followed her. After the familiar people finished greeting each other, Team Leader Chang and Team Leader Li, who were in charge of the arena, also came over. Aunt Qin was the hall master of Mingsui Hall, so her status was quite high. How could the 2 small team leaders of Kitty Hawk Hall not come over to greet her? Although Aunt Qin was amiable in front of Zhang Xiaohua and the others, she didn't speak kindly to the other members of the Misty School. She calmly returned the greeting and said, "You two should be busy with your own things. I'm just here to watch." The 2 team leaders couldn't help but smile bitterly. "You've brought a group of female disciples with you. In addition to the few who came just now, Zhang Xiaohua's group of relatives and friends is more than the number of people participating in the competition. They've completely surrounded the arena, so how can we not be busy?" However, the competition on the arena was still going on. The 2 team leaders didn't dare to say anything and hurriedly returned. As a result, this year's Kitty Eagle Hall's martial arts exhibition had a very interesting scene. There were many small arenas in the square, and all of them were filled with teenagers and children. Only one arena in the corner was surrounded by adults, gesticulating as they watched the children compete in the arena. Below the arena, the youths participating in the competition were all squeezed into a corner of the arena. There were not even as many of them as there were people who were watching the excitement. This kind of situation in the martial arts exhibition for many years, so it attracted a lot of people. Not long after, it was Zhang Xiaohua's turn to go on stage. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua walk up the escalator to the arena step by step, the spectators weren't surprised. The female disciples of Mingsui Hall had already heard the story of Zhang Xiaohu picking up bird eggs yesterday, so they naturally knew. The people of the pharmacy hall usually stayed with Zhang Xiaohua, so they knew that Zhang Xiaohua didn't know Qigong at all. If she didn't take the escalator, where would she go? Furthermore, Nia Xiao, and the others were looking at each other with narrowed eyebrows, as if they were gloating. They were probably waiting to see Zhang Xiaohua get kicked out of the arena. However, when Zhang Xiaohua started fighting with her opponent, she really displayed her brilliant martial arts on the arena. "You attack, and I retreat. You retreat, and I attack. When you tire me out, I disturb you. When you disturb me, I dodge you. When you disturb me, I dodge you. When you disturb me, I dodge you." Nia Xiao, and the others' eyeballs almost fell to the ground. A few of them secretly thought, could this be the legendary guerrilla tactic? However, below the arena, the most astonished ones were not Nia Xiao, and the rest. As He Tianshu watched, He was rubbing his eyes. He even secretly pinched his own thigh to ascertain if he was dreaming or not. The layman watched for the excitement while the expert watched for the skill. Although Nie Xiao, and the rest were astonished, they were only watching for the excitement. They did not really know the meaning behind Zhang Xiaohua's footwork. He Tianshu was different. He could be said to be Zhang Xiaohua's real master, who taught ethereal steps. It was also because he had practiced ethereal steps and had also taught Zhang Xiaohua ethereal steps that he was deeply shocked. Zhang Xiaohua's footwork had already exceeded the scope of what he had taught. On one hand, the footwork that Zhang Xiaohua was displaying now was mostly what he had seen in the Ethereal Steps secret manual. It was something that he had just comprehended and had not taught to Zhang Xiaohua. There were also some that he had not fully comprehended and was still pondering over in his heart. Others might not have felt anything, but when He Tianshu saw it, he immediately felt enlightened. Many of the questions in the footwork had been answered in an instant. On the other hand, he had already taught Zhang Xiaohua earlier, but now, when Zhang Xiaohua was displaying it, there had already been a huge change. It was not the same as what he remembered. For ordinary martial arts, if there was a mistake in displaying it, one would be able to see the flaw at a glance. But Zhang Xiaohua's display was flawless, and there was no flaw to speak of. Therefore, He Tianshu could not be sure if this display was wrong. Suddenly, a thought flashed in He Tianshu's mind. Am I the one who is teaching Zhang Xiaohua ethereal steps? Or is it Zhang Xiaohua who is teaching me? He Tianshu did not have enough time to ponder over his question. The time for an incense stick to burn was up, and Zhang Xiaohua's match was naturally a draw. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua jump down from the stage, Nie Xiao and the rest surrounded her with a whoosh. They laughed and said, Zhang Xiaohua, I didn't expect you to be so powerful. Just relying on this incomplete fist technique and inexplicable footwork, you were actually able to fight to a draw with your opponent. Our brothers were even prepared to receive you outside the stage. It seems like our efforts were in vain. Zhang Xiaohua giggled and cupped her hands. Lucky, lucky. Ashamed, ashamed. Zhang Xiaohua squeezed her way out and saw He Tianshu with his eyes closed as if he was thinking about something. She did not dare to disturb him and walked in front of Aunt Qin. Aunt Qin praised her with a smile. In just over a month's time, you were able to comprehend ethereal steps to such a level. It is truly worthy of celebration. Zhang Xiaohua modestly replied, It is all because of Captain, his good teachings. I am still a bit stupid and was unable to learn Qigong. Aunt Qin said, It is not bad to learn the footwork first. However, I see that you have yet to reach the realm of large success. This ethereal steps and your fist technique have yet to merge well together. Zhang Xiaohua nodded and said, That's right. I don't know why, but these two martial arts cannot be merged together. It seems like I still have to practice more. Aunt Qin nodded and said, If you can merge these two martial arts, then you will be like a tiger that has grown wings. Winning the competition should not be a problem. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua suddenly felt someone pulling her. Turning around, she saw He Tianshu. After He Tianshu pulled Zhang Xiaohua to a corner, he carefully asked, Zhang Xiaohua, did someone teach you ethereal steps? Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and shook her head. He Tianshu asked again, Then you didn't show ethereal steps to anyone, right? Zhang Xiaohua still shook her head. Only then did He Tianshu heave a sigh of relief. However, his suspicions grew as he asked again, Since no one taught you, and you didn't consult anyone about the ethereal steps, how did you manage to learn the footwork after the ethereal steps? Zhang Xiaohua finally understood He Tianshu's worries and whispered, Captain, I really didn't ask anyone, and no one taught me. Didn't you show me the footwork after that? I memorized it in my heart and took some time to practice it. He Tianshu opened his mouth wide and said, You learned it after practicing it? Aren't you afraid of biting your tongue? I tried to comprehend it for a long time, but still couldn't comprehend it. You learned it after practicing it for a while. Aren't you slapping me in the face? Zhang Xiaohua's face turned red as she waved her hands and said, I didn't mean it that way. I really learned it myself. Maybe I practiced it 5 or 6 times. He Tianshu wanted to choose not to believe her words, but the truth was right in front of his eyes. He had no choice but to believe it. He still didn't give up and asked, Then why did the footwork I taught you change when you stepped on it? That Zhang Xiaohua couldn't explain it and said, I don't know either. Captain, I still remember when you taught me. When I practiced it, it changed. I couldn't practice it back, no matter how hard I tried. He Tianshu was speechless. Why did he continue to ask? Therefore, He Tianshu thought for a while and said to her, Zhang Xiaohua, I won't watch the rest of the competition. The footwork you showed just now inspire me a lot. I have to go back and study it now. I believe that with your performance just now, it won't be a problem to get a draw for the rest of the competition. When Zhang Xiaohua heard that her footwork inspired He Tianshu, she was very happy and said, Then you should go back and study it quickly. Don't forget it again. He Tianshu listened, nodded, and turned to leave. But he was pulled back by Zhang Xiaohua and asked embarrassedly, That Captain, can you give me the pharmaceutical hall's token? I still want to stay in your guest room tonight. He Tianshu didn't hesitate. He took out the token from his pocket and handed it to her, then hurriedly left. When Zhang Xiaohua walked back to the arena, Aunt Qin also smiled and said goodbye to her. Zhang Xiaohua, I won't stay to watch. Yesterday, I heard from Chang'e that you drew 3 rounds. I was very curious and wanted to come and cheer you on. I hope you can win. But now that I know the reason, I think your next few rounds will also be draws. Zhang Xiaohua scratched her head and said, If nothing unexpected happens, it should be a draw. I really don't know how to defeat this group of little boy. They're really strong. Aunt Qin said, You're the strong one. How long have you practiced martial arts, and how long have they practiced martial arts? They're probably worried about not being able to defeat you. Zhang Xiaohua didn't comment. Aunt Qin said again, There are still some trivial matters at Mingcue Hall. I'll go back first. When you have time, come find me at Mingcue Hall. Zhang Xiaohua said with a smile, Okay, big sister Qin. I'll go when I have time. Aunt Qin nodded and prepared to leave. The female disciples of Mingcue Hall, Chang'e and Qin, had already seen 3 draws yesterday. Today, they were going to watch another round. Zhang Xiaohua's method of competition was refreshing when they watched the first round. But after watching it too many times, it would all be the same. There was no point in watching it anymore. They came today purely to follow the hall master to join in the fun. As for the other female disciples, seeing that their hall master wanted to leave, they didn't plan to stay either. Thus, under Aunt Qin's lead, all the female disciples of Mingcue Hall left. Zhang Xiaohu watched Chang'e and the others leave. He felt a little disappointed. He turned to Zhang Xiaohua and said, Xiaohua, you can compete here. I don't think you'll lose. I didn't go back yesterday and have to go back to take a look. I won't stay here to watch you compete. Zhang Xiaohua grinned and said, Do what you need to do, second brother. I'll go find you after the competition tonight. Zhang Xiaohu also left. Zhang Xiaohua turned around and saw Nie and the others surrounding him. He hurriedly said, Second brother, are you leaving too? Nie came over and put his arm around his shoulder. He said intimately, How can we? We're good brothers. We'll definitely support you until the end. Zhang Xiaohua shrunk his shoulders and said, Don't, second brother. Looking at your smile, it's very fake. Is there something wrong? If there's something, just say it. If you don't say it, how will I know if I can answer you? If I can't answer you, second brother, you can't force me. Nie face was full of awkwardness as he pinched his face and said in puzzlement, How can you tell? But then he said, I do have something to tell you. But it's not just me. Everyone is very surprised and wants me to ask. Zhang Xiaohua blinked and said, Say it. I'm listening. Nie looked at the people beside him and said, I represent the brothers who usually fight with you in the medicine field to ask you a question. What's the name of the martial arts you used on the stage? Big Dipper Magical Fist. Zhang Xiaohua said without hesitation. Didn't I tell you guys before? Niet Er shook his head and said, Don't divert our attention. Zhang Xiaohua, this won't work here. I'm not talking about your random fist technique. I'm talking about your footwork. We thought it was very familiar. It seems to be similar to the one Captain He used. Zhang Xiaohua asked, You guys didn't ask Captain He? Niet Er curled his lips and said, We asked, but he didn't say. That's why we wanted to ask you. Zhang Xiaohua heard and said decisively, Then I won't tell you guys either. Niet Er came up with a sullen face and said, We're all good brothers. What's so hard to say? Zhang Xiaohua shook her head and said, This is my privacy and secret. Why should I tell you guys? Niet Er still smiled and said, Good brothers don't have any secrets. You can share with us what you know. We can also share with you what we know. Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua rolled her eyes and said, You said it. You have to tell me what you know. Niet Er heard, and his face changed. He felt that he was tricked by Zhang Xiaohua, but thinking about it, what could he do that could make Zhang Xiaohua remember? So he gathered his courage and asked, What do you want to ask? Zhang Xiaohua narrowed her eyes and whispered into Niet Er's ear, You tell me about the forbidden area of the potion hall, and I'll tell you about the footwork. Niet Er jumped up as if he was bitten by a snake. His face changed, and he hurriedly said, This is our Misty School's secret. You're not a disciple of the Misty School. If I tell you, I'll be punished by the gang. Forget it. I don't want to hear your secret. Just pretend I didn't ask. Zhang Xiaohua saw Niet Er's reaction and immediately pulled on his sleeve and said, Don't go, Brother Er. Since you don't want to answer this question, I'll make another request. What do you think? Niet Er looked at Zhang Xiaohua suspiciously and said, Why do I feel that you're up to no good? But as long as it doesn't involve the gang's rules or secrets, I'll try my best to agree. Zhang Xiaohua said, If you teach me 10 sets of knife or sword skills, I'll tell you the secret. 10 sets? Niet Er almost shouted. Are you kidding me? That's our Misty School secret. How can I teach it to you? Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly explained, I don't need you to teach me Misty Schools. As long as it's knife or sword skills, it's fine. It's fine as long as it's common in the pugilistic world. Oh, Niet Er nodded and said, I see. As long as it's knife or sword skills, it's fine. I don't need Misty Schools. Yes, that's right. Zhang Xiaohua confirmed again. But, Niet Er said again, 10 sets is too much. I don't know that many. How about 2 sets? Zhang Xiaohua said, Hee, you don't have to be the only one. There's still them. As long as you gather 10 sets, it'll be fine. Zhang Xiaohua winked at the people beside her. Niet Er looked at the crowd, gritted his teeth and said, No, 10 sets is too much. How about 8? We'll teach you 2 sets each. Deal, Zhang Xiaohua said without hesitation. Thus, Zhang Xiaohua and Niet Er's palms hit each other. Then Zhang Xiaohua casually said, I thought that each of you would teach 1 set. Who knew that each of you would teach 2 sets? I've really struck it rich. When Niet Er heard that, he almost blacked out and sat on the ground. Niet Er didn't faint under the support of the crowd. Then his mouth trembled as he asked, We've already agreed to your conditions. Now, you can tell us your secret. Zhang Xiaohua smiled mysteriously and said, Of course. I'm a kind person. Since you've set an example, I'll definitely tell you. Listen carefully. The movement technique that Captain He and I are using is called ethereal steps. Ah, the few of them were shocked when they heard that. Niet Er still didn't believe her and asked, Ethereal steps? This is one of the 3 divine techniques of our Misty School. Even Captain, he doesn't have the qualifications to cultivate it. How do you know this divine technique? You're not lying to us, right? Zhang Xiaohua's face was full of injustice and said, Brother Little Er, how can you doubt my character like this? When have I ever lied to you? It's really ethereal steps. It's not fake at all. Think about it. If it's not the magical ethereal steps, what other movement technique can let Captain his movement technique improve so much in such a short period of time? Can it let me compete with this group of greedy little boy and not lose? When Nye heard these few reasons, he had already believed a little in his heart. However, he still wanted to get to the bottom of it and asked, "Then, how did you and Captain he learn it?" Looking at Nye and the rest, who were thirsting for an answer, Zhang Xiaohua said proudly, "It's not that I don't want to tell you, but this sect leader, said that this matter cannot be told to anyone. If you're not afraid of being punished by the sect rules, then I'll tell you." When everyone heard that, their faces changed, and with a pew sound, they all vomited out a mouthful of blood and fell onto the ground. After messing around for so long, everyone had to teach Zhang Xiaohua 2 sets of sword techniques in exchange for 3 words, -1